Good morning. I'd like to call the January 11, 2024 APCD hearing board meeting to order. It's 9:04 a.m. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll and swear in any witnesses?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Please note Chair Rodriguez, Vice Chair Schlick, and members Powers have notified us that they will not be present for today's meeting. Alternate member Engelman will be participating on member Powers' behalf. All remaining board members are participating in person today. And I'll go ahead and call the roll. Member Gonzalez?
Present.
Member Engelman?
Present.
Dr. Spencer?
Present.
And again, for the record, Vice Chair Schlick and Chair Rodriguez will not be present for today's meeting. I'll ask the following individuals to identify themselves for the record. Hearing Board Counsel, Emily Helms.
Emily Helms, Senior Deputy County Counsel, Counsel for the Hearing Board.
Emily will be participating remotely. And Air Pollution Control District staff.
Yes, I'm Mary Mahoney, Civil Actions Investigator with the district.
I am Dave McGee-Hill. I'm also a Civil Actions Investigator with the district.
And Nathan Guttwiller, Senior Chemist with the district.
Thank you. I will now swear in those that wish to provide testimony on behalf of any item on today's agenda. This includes petitioners, respondents, and APCD staff. Please raise your right hand for the swearing in. You'll want to go ahead. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in the matter before this hearing board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to non-agenda public communication. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the hearing board on subject matter within the hearing board's jurisdiction, but not on any item on today's agenda. Before we proceed, Madam Clerk, have we received any comment or any requests from members of the public who wish to address the hearing board today on non-agenda public communication?
Dr. Spencer, we have received no requests from members of the public to address the board under non-agenda public comment today. However, just one moment, let me share information. However, if there are any members of the public on the teleconference line now, you may dial in, or you may dial in using the information presented on the screen, and you can indicate that you wish to speak by using on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. I am so sorry. Technical difficulty. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to provide public testimony on administrative item B.
All right, so we'll now move on to administrative item B, the approval of the October 26, 2023 San Diego County Air Pollution Control District Hearing Board Statement of Proceedings and Minutes. Before we proceed, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board today on administrative item B?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. We have received no request to speak under public comment for administrative item B. However, let me go ahead and present that again. However, if there are any members of the public wishing to provide public comment under administrative item B, you can go ahead and dial into the conference line now or indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Dr. Spencer, there are no members of the public wishing to provide it.
Okay, great. So we'll proceed with comments from district staff and board members. District staff, any comments on them?
We have no comments.
Okay. Any comments from any of the board members? If you have a chance to review.
Yes, sir. I don't have any comments.
No comments. All right. And as there are no public speakers, is there a motion for approval?
I move to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. There's a motion by member Engelman, seconded by member Gonzalez. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Member Engelman?
Aye.
Dr. Spencer?
Aye.
That motion passes with all members present voting aye, with the exception of Vice Chair Schlick and Chair Rodriguez, who are not present for today's.
So we'll now move to administrative item C, which is the selection of chair and vice chair for 2024. But before we proceed, seeing that we have several members absent today, I'd like the board to consider continuing this item until February 8th, 2024's meeting. Do we have any comments?
It sounds reasonable to me.
Any comments from staff? Any comments from, is there any members of the public that wish to
There
comment?
have been no requests for public comment.
Okay. So can I ask for a motion then?
I move that we continue agenda item C to the next APCD hearing board meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. So there's a motion by member Engelmann, seconded by member Gonzalez. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
member Engelmann,
Aye.
Dr. Spencer.
Aye.
That motion passes with all members present voting aye to continue administrative item C, which is the selection of chair and vice chair for 2024 to the next available public meeting, which would be February 8th, 2024.
Okay.
With the exceptions of Vice Chair Schlick and Chair Rodriguez, who are not present for today's meeting.
Understood. All right, so we'll now move to the petitions before the board. Next up will be petition 4527, San Diego County Air Pollution Control District, County of San Diego abatement order against Respondent and Biofuel. Before we begin discussion on this petition, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board on this petition tonight?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. We have received no requests from members of the public wishing to address the board on petition 4527. However, if there are members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Dr. Spencer, there is one member of the public wishing to provide public comment.
Okay, terrific. So thank you, Madam Clerk. As is customary, the board will take an update presentation from APCD staff, then respondent presentation from representatives from New Leaf Biofuel, and then any public comment from members of the public that want to address today. So, district staff go first.
Yes, I'm going to be giving a presentation for petition 4527. So again, everyone, good morning. And just to read it for the record, my name is Mary Mahoney and I work as a civil actions investigator with the district. And Mia, if you could please display my cover slide. Thank you. Today's status update marks 1 year and approximately 2 months since New Leaf Biofuel and the district began working together under a stipulated abatement order. The purpose of the order has been and continues to be focused on reducing the impact of nuisance odors on the community resulting from New Leaf Biofuels processing of used cooking oil, along with other related operations. The status update on this petition arrives amidst operational changes being recently implemented by New Leaf. Following a brief wind down period on December 21st of last year, New Leaf has stated that they reduced their used cooking oil processing operation at their south plant and halted biodiesel processing at their north plant entirely. These changes should also reduce the number of truck transfers between plants significantly. The district is hopeful that these substantial operational changes will minimize the impact on the community. However, it is still uncertain how these changes will affect odor emissions because some of the operations that contribute to odors will continue, and therefore it is important to keep the board and community informed about the district's ongoing observations during its inspections over the past several months and to provide an update on the current circumstances. Slide 2, please. Today's update will cover 5 areas: a summary, odor results, district investigations, the current status of New Leaf's operations, and updated district recommendations. Slide 3, please. This slide provides a visual representation of the 6 notices of violation, or NOVs for short, issued by the district to New Leaf for creating nuisance odors over the last approximately 2 years. The first odor nuisance NOV was issued December 2021, approximately 2 weeks after the first public citizen odor complaint was received. Second and third odor nuisance NOVs were issued in February and August of 2022 respectively. During this period, district inspectors conducted facility inspections and odor surveys around New Leaf's plants in Barrio Logan. Recall that district inspectors classify odors on a 6-tiered scale that ranges from no odor to very strong. Odors described as distinct, strong, and very strong are the odor classifications at the higher odor intensities of the 6-tiered scale. District staff often observe odors as being distinct or strong and frequent during this time frame. Then on October 27th of 2022, as indicated by the red dot on the slide's timeline, the district hearing board granted a stipulated abatement order, requiring New Leaf to implement short-term odor mitigation strategies until the future installation of an odor reduction system, or ORS for short, would be installed at New Leaf South Plant. The South Plant at that time was identified as the primary source of odor. The fourth odor nuisance violation was issued to New Leaf in the interim period after the original stipulated abatement order was in effect, but before the installation of the ORS at the South Plant. Again, the odors leading up to the issuance of the fourth odor nuisance NOV were frequently found to be distinct, strong, and occasionally very strong. With the eventual installation of the ORS at the South Plant, there came a temporary period of a few months of noticeably reduced odors, potentially due to reduced production. The fifth odor nuisance NOV was issued June 13th last year. However, the fifth violation was linked to nuisance odor observations beginning in mid-March of 2023. Between March and June of last year, odors became more intense again, and the layers of odor sources were identified, meaning odor sources related not only to New Leaf South Plant's operations were becoming evident. North Plant odors were increasingly identified, and in particular, odors from the wastewater treatment operation at the North Plant. Shortly after the issuance of the fifth violation in June, New Leaf obtained a portable carbon canister. The portable carbon canister is a type of odor reduction control equipment that reduces odor emissions from truck transfer activity by capturing fugitive odors from being released into the atmosphere. Because the carbon canister is portable, New Leaf communicated that it could be deployed at any location in either the North or South Plant. The timing of the issuance of the fifth violation was just before a hearing board meeting, and the board was able to quickly incorporate a requirement for New Leaf to begin to use the new portable carbon canister for reducing odors from truck activity. As will be discussed in upcoming slides, the portable carbon canister was not effectively utilized. The sixth and most recent odor nuisance NOV was issued August 30th of last year, which cited odor nuisances from North Plant truck transfer activity, despite the use of the portable carbon canister being in place. Odors continued to be identified after August, but in October of last year, New Leaf announced their significant operational changes, and odors most recently have been reduced, and we hope to see this as a lasting improvement. The two most recent violations were provided to the hearing board in the pre-hearing material submissions packet, and they are included in today's meeting agenda for reference. Slide 4, please. I now want to bring your attention to the two board orders that have been granted by the district hearing board. The first stipulated board order was granted over a year ago in October of 2022, and it focused on New Leaf South Plant's operations. This is because the South Plant is where used cooking oil is received, stored, and processed. The main objective of the original order was to install a permitted ORS system at the South Plant, which was installed on schedule in December of 2022. Additionally, New Leaf was required to conduct specific activities to progress through the permitting process for the ORS and to order and install parts for the ORS on schedule. Before the ORS operation, an interim odor management program was implemented, which involved numerous housekeeping and documentation practices. This order also included other requirements such as keeping equipment and entry points at the South Plant sealed or closed as necessary to reduce odors. These measures in the stipulated abatement order resulted in a reduction in odors from the south plant for approximately 2 months. Starting in mid-March of last year, nuisance odors were again identified by district inspectors. Specifically, odors were found near the north plant and the south plant and were sometimes found in conjunction with truck activity. An amendment to the original stipulated order was granted by the district hearing board at the June 22nd, 2023 meeting. The amendment expanded the scope to include both the north and south plants and added conditions for New Leaf to store used oil collection bins in an enclosed manner and to use a portable carbon canister to capture and filter odorous air emissions during truck to plant transfers at both plants. The date to begin the use of the new portable carbon canister was moved from June 30th to July 7th, 2023 at the request of New Leaf. The reason for the delay was stated as being due to the duty ban component of the portable canister being delayed for delivery. The request for the delayed use of the portable carbon canister was granted and set for July 7th, 2023. The amendment to the order also required that New Leaf conduct an internal odor investigation. The intention was for potential odor sources with odor reduction proposals to be identified by New Leaf and carried out with their initiative to further reduce remaining nuisance odors. New Leaf's odor investigation report was conducted by the deadline date and provided to the district. The original stipulated order, the amendment to the stipulated order, and New Leaf's internal odor investigation report were provided to the district hearing board. They're included on the agenda for today's hearing for reference, and both orders remain in effect. Slide 5, please. On this slide, you can see a timeline that shows the number of public odor complaints received so far. Timeline also highlights the beginning of the 2 major odor reduction strategies, with red dots representing the installation of the ORS at the south plant and the portable carbon canister, respectively. Since yesterday, a total of 78 odor complaints have been filed. Before the ORS was installed at the south plant, there were 32 public citizen complaints filed over approximately 12 months. Since the ORS began operating, there have been 46 public complaints filed over the last approximately 14 months. Of these 46 complaints, 22 were filed after the use of the portable canister became mandatory on July 7th of last year. These 78 total complaints were filed by 15 different individuals. The last complaint, the most recent complaint, was filed January 2nd of this year. There was only 1 complaint received by the district in December 2023, and in November 2023, 2 complaints were filed.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is that a typo on the slide that says June 22 complaints, July 7th, 2022?
It should be 23.
Just a quick-
Yes.
Thank you.
And slide 6, please. On this slide, you can see a breakdown of the district's odor surveys, which have been conducted for over 2 years now. These surveys are currently conducted using a fixed odor route with 20 different odor observation locations. The district has been reporting the odor levels and their location to New Leaf after each survey for several months now. In total, 252 odor surveys have been conducted, with 80 and 165 odor surveys conducted before and after the operation of the ORS began, respectively. Currently, there have been 73 and 58 dates where distinct odors have been identified before and after the operation of the ORS began, respectively. 31 of the most recent dates that had identified odors at distinct have now been conducted after the use of the portable carbon canister became required. However, most of these dates occurred approximately 2 or more months ago. November and December of 2023 had only 2 dates where odors were found to be distinct, and only 1 of those 2 dates had odors at this distinct level being found at residential homes, indicating a more recent positive odor trend potentially emerging. Slide 7, please. I'm going to share the most recent odor survey results now, starting with the results from 3 locations on the odor route that are nearest to or at residents' homes along Newton Avenue. These locations are identified as numbers 2, 5, and 6, and they're highlighted in yellow on the map. Slide 8, please.
Before you move on, can you comment on the prevailing wind? Like what's the general direction of the wind in that photo?
It comes mostly from the west.
Okay, and this is standard north, south, east, west orientation.
For the most part, it tends to blow from New Leaf's plants, unfortunately, across the street to where the residential homes are.
Thank you.
These data are from November 23rd of 2021 through December 31st, 2023. The results are divided into before and after the ORS began operating at the South Plant. While the odors have improved over the 2 years, there are still odors ranging from faint to strong, approximately 20% of the time at locations 2, 5, and 6. Of course, the community is strongly impacted when nuisance odors reach personal property because there is no option for them to avoid this nuisance. Slide 9, please. The next set of odor results have been compiled for odors found along Newton Avenue across the street from residential homes. Depending on wind direction and wind strength, these odors can end up at residential homes nearby, just feet away. These locations are highlighted in yellow on the map, and they're identified as location numbers 3, 4, 7, and 15. Slide 10, please. The odor results are again broken down to odors before and after ORS operation at the South Plant for locations 3, 4, 7, and 15. Again, improvement in odor intensity is observed, but odors remain across the street from homes approximately 30% of the time when odors have been classified as faint, distinct, or strong. Slide 11, please. On this slide, you can find the most recent results of odor surveys conducted during November and December of last year. 19 surveys were conducted. The results are displayed on the left for the odors found on residential property, and on the right are the odors found across the street from residential properties. The most recent data near and at residential properties show that the current trend is no odors or very faint odors. These results correlate that decreased production levels at the plants are likely contributing to less intense odors. Of course, there may be fluctuations in production levels as New Leaf services change and adapt.
Another question, just to verify, if I understood the picture correctly, 2, 5, and 6 are right near the residences. The across the street locations are near or at the fence line of the facility, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Slide 12, please. Now I'm going to share some information about some of the district's inspection results that have been conducted since the last board update was presented on June 22nd of last year. Our routine inspection was conducted on August 11th at New Leaf. And just as the inspector completed the New Leaf inspection, they were called away to another nearby assignment within walking distance and returned a few hours later to the New Leaf area. When the inspector returned to the New Leaf area again to retrieve their vehicle, they immediately reacted to an unusual and intense odor coming from New Leaf's north plant. The odor was identified as a fire type odor. An impromptu investigation was initiated, and the inspector identified distinct odors at 3 locations near the north plant. The cause of the odor was sourced to truck activity at New Leaf's north plant. This activity had not been observed before, but a New Leaf truck's pump system was being used to vacuum soapy groundwater from the facility's concrete as part of facility maintenance. The exhaust from the truck's pump was odorous, even though the truck's tank was not being used to transfer odorous materials. While the inspector was witnessing real-time distinct odors due to the vacuuming activity, a new public citizen complaint was being simultaneously received by the district on account of the same odor incident. The portable carbon canister, capable of reducing odors during truck transfer activity, was not being used to reduce these odors. Slide 13, please. This slide is a visual representation of some of the locations on the district's odor survey route. Location numbers 5, 6, and 7 highlighted in yellow are areas where distinct odors were identified in real time because of New Leaf's truck being used for vacuuming on August 11th. Location number 7 is nearest to the wastewater treatment portion of the North Plant, and areas 5 and 6 are located where residential homes are also located. Slide 14, please. As mentioned during the inspection on August 11th, district staff discovered a brand new odor source: the use of New Leaf's trucks for housekeeping, specifically cleaning concrete using trucks to vacuum dirty water, resulting in the release of odors from the truck's onboard pump system. The amended June 22nd order required the use of the portable carbon canister for truck transfers, but the order did not specifically prescribe any conditions for using the truck's onboard pump systems for vacuuming groundwater. Nevertheless, it was expected that New Leaf staff would be able to identify that using the truck to vacuum dirty groundwater is a potential source of odor and that the portable carbon canister could have been used. After the district identified this new odor source, New Leaf used shop vacs to clean up the remaining water. Even though New Leaf conducted an internal odor investigation, they did not identify their maintenance activities using trucks as a potential source of odor emissions. This event highlights that at the time, New Leaf's responses tended to be reactive rather than proactive. This odor-causing activity is likely to remain even after recent operational changes occur at New Leaf. Slide 15, please. I'm now going to discuss an inspection finding from August 23rd, 2023. A district inspector visually observed odors emanating from truck activity while simultaneously detecting distinct level of odors while at New Leaf's North Plant. The significance of this observation is that it confirmed the importance of continuing to look at truck activity as potential means to reduce nuisance odors. Before I go on further, though, I have included a video on this slide to demonstrate to the board an example of what visible odorous truck pump emissions look like. It's approximately 5 seconds in length. Would the board have any objection to having the clerk play the video?
I'd like to see it.
Vote on. I'd like to see it.
The presentations were, the slides were included in the agenda. There was just no way to include the video in the
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
It was
So,
submitted.
think about
Okay.
it later.
Thank you, Mia. So if you looked closely inside the red circled area, you saw visible emissions from the truck's pump exhaust. It appears as a haze floating just under the pump's outlet pipe near the side of the truck's frame. You may also have noticed the moist concrete directly below this area, both visual indicators of emissions, which unfortunately also happen to be odorous. These visible emissions are not due to typical engine combustion, but rather due to the truck's engine powering its onboard vacuum pump while either loading or unloading odorous materials. These odorous emissions, as evidenced in the video, are directly released into the atmosphere without the use of any odor control equipment to otherwise capture or filter the emissions. The portable carbon canister, if used properly, can capture these otherwise fugitive emissions during truck transfers. This odor-causing activity will remain even with the recent operational changes occurring at New Leaf. Slide 16, please. On August 23rd, the inspector saw significant visible emissions from truck activity at the North Plant. At the same time, the inspector observed distinct odors. This was unexpected because the portable carbon canister was operating and should have captured the emissions and therefore controlled the odor as well. The odorous emissions were observed exiting the truck's pump outlet pipe and bypassing the intake hose or arm of the portable carbon canister. An on-site inspection followed to investigate why the truck's pumps emissions were bypassing the portable carbon canister. The district inspector found that the permanent duty fan component of the portable carbon canister was uninstalled, resting on a pallet as shown in the photo on the right. Instead, a temporary fan was installed on the portable carbon canister. The temporary fan was not as efficient as a permanent duty fan would have been. The amended stipulated order granted on June 22nd last year had a condition requiring the operation of the portable carbon canister starting July 7th last year at both plants during truck transfer activity of odorous materials. Although the required equipment was operating, it was not performing as intended, demonstrating that the appropriate use of air pollution control equipment is just as important as having a requirement in place to acquire and install it. The permanent duty fan was not installed on the portable canister until September 10th of last year and was not ever used at the south plant. And the district found out about this issue during its own inspections rather than being informed directly by me. Slide 17, please. During the same inspection, the inspector obtained photos of the portable carbon canister's arm attachment. On the left side, there are two photos of the carbon canister. The larger photo shows the arm hose resting with a homemade attachment at the end, while the close-up photo following the red arrow shows that the attachment is made from plastic strips that have been bundled together. This homemade attachment was observed to not be effective in capturing the truck's pump exhaust into the canister unit. Although the equipment was being used, again, it was not being used efficiently. Slide 18, please. On August 23rd of last year, while conducting the odor survey portion of that inspection, the district inspector took a photo near the alleyway outside of the south plant where distinct odors were being simultaneously identified. Through the building's window, an interior roof access hatch door was observed to be open, circled in red on the photo on the left. The original stipulated abatement order had a requirement to keep the building closed at points of entry when used cooking oil was being processed. An on-site inspection ensued at the south plant and yielded the inspection photo on the right. The red circle identifies the open roof access hatch door. The skylight next to the open access hatch is closed by contrast. The south plant was processing used cooking oil at the time that the hatch was found open, and this was documented as a violation of the original stipulated abatement order. The roof access door remained open for over 4 hours that day. Slide 19, please. During the remainder of the on-site inspection at the south plant on August 23rd last year, other noticeable openings were discovered by the district. In the picture on the right, daylight can be seen streaming into the building through a gap between the roof and the wall. Also below, a hole was found in the wall. These openings were discovered despite New Leaf's reports of having already sealed the south plant. New Leaf should have addressed these openings proactively and been diligent in complying with the orders. Slide 20, please. Overall, these August 2023 inspection findings identified that truck activity supporting wastewater treatment operations at the North Plant was a specific cause of nuisance odors. These inspections also documented that the portable canister was not being used efficiently, evidenced by odorous emissions not being captured during truck activity, with simultaneous odors being observed, and by observing the uninstalled duty fan and homemade hose attachments of the portable canister. These inspections also found obvious south plant openings that could allow odors to escape. In addition, distinct level of odors were being found near the plants and near residents. The sixth violation was issued shortly after these inspections, and permitting requirements were then triggered for the wastewater treatment operation at the North Plant. Although New Leaf is scaling back production, these areas of concern identified during these inspections remain relevant to continued odor mitigation strategies for New Leaf's proposed future operations. Truck activity at both plants will continue, and the south plant will still receive and process used cooking oil. Slide 21, please. I'm now going to share the new operational changes that New Leaf has stated will be occurring at the south plant. The volume of used cooking oil processed at the south plant is estimated to be approximately 6,000 to 8,000 gallons per day instead of 25,000 to 35,000 gallons per day. The south plant will gradually decrease from nonstop operation to operating approximately 5 days per week and New Leaf estimates that each day may see operation for roughly 12 hours. The actual hours and odor impact are still yet to be determined. The south plant is still processing used cooking oil, but 2 of the processing steps will no longer take place. The 2 steps being eliminated are a centrifuge and flash evaporation step. The reduction of these 2 steps means that the used cooking oil will be converted to rendered oil instead of feedstock oil. In the past, the feedstock oil was transferred by truck from the south to the north plant for biodiesel manufacturing. Since there is no feedstock oil to transfer, New Leaf estimates that truck activity between their plants will reduce by approximately 60%. Lastly, New Leaf introduced a truck hose intake to direct truck pump emissions at the south plant to the stationary ORS, since they have not used the portable carbon canister at the south plant. Slide 22, please. New Leaf has 3 odor mitigation strategies that they have stated that they intend to introduce. First, they will conduct a smoke test inside of the south plant periodically to determine leaks in the building structure. The next test is to be conducted on February 24th of this year. Next, New Leaf has stated that they intend to design a portable custom truck enclosure. The enclosure would go under the trucks to trap odorous emissions and direct them to the stationary ORS. Last, New Leaf has stated that they still intend to add new ducting to the processing equipment inside of the south plant and have it directed to the stationary ORS to reduce odors inside of the plant that may otherwise have the ability to escape. A review of this proposal should be completed this month. Slide 23, please. This slide shows what key processes will remain at the south plant. The large stage screening step where debris is removed from used cooking oil will still occur. There is odor potential with this step. The removal of the large items during the step is not conducted in a sealed environment, which can allow odorous emissions to be released. In addition, used cooking oil will still need to be stored, heated, and decanted at the south plant. Wastewater will still be generated at the south plant, and this wastewater will need to be transferred from the south plant to the north plant for processing. The tank capacity to store used cooking oil remains unchanged, and used cooking oil will still be processed, albeit in lesser quantities. Slide 24, please. I'm now going to share the new operational changes that New Leaf has stated will be occurring at the north plant. New Leaf has stated that there is currently no more biodiesel manufacturing, and this is a permanent change. There are also less chemicals being received and no wastewater is being generated. Similar to the south plant, New Leaf has stated that they will obtain a truck enclosure for north plant truck activity, install a fence around the wastewater building at the north plant, and install a solid door to the entrance of the wastewater building. It's currently partially open to the outside air with plastic strips installed. Slide 25, please. This slide shows what key processes will remain at the north plant. New Leaf operates a grease trap waste collection service at their north plant, specifically at the wastewater processing building. This operation is largely unaffected by any of the other operational reductions, as the expected quantity of restaurant grease trap waste collected and processed will remain the same. The transfer of the grease trap waste to the wastewater building and the subsequent pickup of the sludge waste materials after treatment has odor potential. The necessity to properly use a portable carbon canister therefore remains high. Slide 26, please. Because many of these operational changes occurred only recently, and considering many of New Leaf's proposed odor mitigation strategies are not implemented yet, it's too soon to determine if the odors will remain low until more time passes. Due to the odor nuisance NOV issued specifically for odor nuisances identified at the wastewater building of the north plant, the operation there, which was previously exempt from permitting requirements, must now be permitted. A permit application was submitted to the district in October of last year. And when submitted, the application was missing some needed information for it to be processed timely by the district. The district has since communicated this to New Leaf starting in November, December, and this month as well. And as of today, the application is still incomplete, meaning that the permitting process for the wastewater operation, including the processing of the grease trap waste, is stalled. The permit, once issued, should help to address odor issues. Therefore, a completed application submitted timely to the district is important. Finally, the use of the portable carbon canister is an important odor mitigation strategy to reduce truck odors, and its proper use by New Leaf will continue to be important. This requirement will be reflected as a condition of the permit once permit is completed. Slide 27, please. The district plans to continue working with New Leaf to establish suitable conditions for their future operations. The parties both parties would like to meet again on March 21st, 2024 for another hearing board update, during which the board may decide to add or remove stipulated conditions if necessary. Meanwhile, the district will enforce nuisance odors if necessary and collaborate with New Leaf to advance their permit application for their wastewater treatment operation. The district will also determine appropriate conditions for this permit with sustained decreased operations and a new permit in place. It is hopeful to abate odors to non-nuisance levels. And last slide, please. And this concludes the update presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, so shall we do questions for the district now or after the lead's presentation, or both?
Seems like it would be appropriate to wait till we hear the additional testimony.
Sure. Yes, that was my thought as well. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and hear the presentation from representatives from the lead.
Thank you, members. My name is Chris White. For the record, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for New Leaf Biofuel. If you go to the first slide, please. So I'm just going to very briefly, because Mary has already described most of it, cover the biodiesel closure, talk about the NOVs, and then explain some of the things that we have done and are doing going forward. Just before I go on, there are a couple of things that are not covered in my presentation that Mary raised, but I think I should address. One is that when we talk about summary numbers from the APCD now, we had always, from I think, I've assumed that everyone can recall, we always sort of talked about the stent as being the threshold level for nuisance. Now, when we talk about the percentage of odor observations that are of significance, we have ratcheted down to include faint. And this is something that I will discuss a little bit more in my presentation, and it is an area of concern to us. The second one that I wanted to address was the truck maintenance activity. This wasn't a routine housekeeping activity. There was a spill of a particular material at the plant from our glycerin process, and that had to be cleaned up rapidly. Yes, certainly they should have probably used the portable canister, but getting that material off the ground and out of the way was the priority in that situation. We have a closed site in terms of any release of water or material, but when there's heavy rain, we do have to release stormwater, so it's really important for us that we have a spill of something that could be harmful in stormwater, that we get it thoroughly cleaned and out of the way as quickly as possible. So that was not a standard activity. I don't say that non-use of the canister is acceptable, but it certainly is not a matter of routine that we use trucks for cleanup without the appropriate measures for odor control. The second one, visible emissions from the truck. That particular truck is an old truck. It's been decommissioned now. That emission and that liquid you see is the lubricating oil that you have to inject into vacuum pumps to make them run. And that pump was in a poor state of maintenance, and the fume is the oil fume, and the spat on the ground is the oil spatter. Don't disagree discount the fact that there was odour there, but the visible emission has nothing to do with the odour. Get the odour with or without visible emission from a vacuum pump.
When was that truck decommissioned?
What?
Do you know when that truck was decommissioned?
Probably in August or September. Might be a little bit after that. It was probably very shortly after that incident where the inspector was there when it was being run. And I will discuss the issue with the portable canister as well in detail. I don't agree quite with Mary's representation of what happened, and some of the other NOV issues. So could we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, it's a little bit difficult, but this is essentially just a repeat of what Mary said about the estimated changes in activity itself. The only thing I wanted to add to this is that the highest temperature and therefore highest vapor potential activities at South were we preheated the oil to above 200 degrees prior to centrifuging. Centrifuging is a large, I don't know how to describe them, but they're the same type of centrifuges that big ships use to clean their oil, fuel oil prior to burning it in their engines. They do create vapor in the centrifuging process, and of course the oil is hot. And the flash evaporator as well, of course, is we maintain that at a temperature above 220 degrees. And it's a vacuum system, and the vacuum vapor was pulled off and discharged into the system. So both of those did definitely add to the odor level at South, and our anecdotal impression is that the odor levels are quite significantly less since we've stopped those activities. Next slide, please. The other thing I'll point out is that we are still maintaining the compliance process set out in the integrated abatement order from our point of view, and I'll cover some of the items that Mary pointed out in a minute. If on the next slide, we also have the voluntarily keeping and providing wherever required by the APCD to truck loading activities and discharge activities at the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please. Well, just one point on South. We, at the moment, the South plant, we are only running it 12 hours a day. That's been for probably a couple of weeks now. We are still running the RS 24 hours a day. It's a very expensive piece of equipment to run for electricity, and we will be, I guess, asking for consideration to not have to run it 24 hours a day at some point when we've established that it's not going to cause any resurgence of odor problems. So for wastewater treatment, we are going to also build a similar housekeeping and spill policing and leak policing profile and record keeping system as we have for the South plant as we go through the permitting for the water treatment. Next slide. So we got the NOVs and there they all are, and that's not terribly easy to read, but I mean, I guess one of our fundamental problems in how these are presented to us is that in the odour, parts of it that relate to odour as opposed to specific practices, there's this use of distinct and frequent. And we just are not quite sure, and I'll go into more detail on this, what comprises frequent. And you know, the records, these are APCD records we're going on, just don't seem to meet what we would consider a reasonable satisfaction of distinct and frequent. And I'll go into that a little bit more in detail. The other summary things is that one of the violations referred to frequent distinct odours in violation of our South permit, but related to all of the areas of the plant. Just from a technical point of view, that doesn't seem like a reasonable type of a violation. And the other one's related to the permit. I mean, they issued us a violation for not having a permit because we'd never applied for one because we hadn't needed one in the past. Now, I understand that's a mechanism to get us to apply for a permit, but it was not a sort of a violation of intent or anything that we could ever do anything about in advance. So if we move on to the last violation item, which was leaving this hatch open in the plant that Mary showed you the pictures of. If you go to the next slide, please. In all of our permitting and pre-permitting discussions, we identified the south plant as the area within that yellow boundary. And there is a solid wall between that part and what we call the warehouse. The skylight is in the warehouse, not in the south plant. Air flows into the warehouse through the wall with fans that positively push the air into the south plant from the warehouse. We have previously had door open complaints for the warehouse, and when addressed with the APCD, there have not been violations. Now, the reason for the south plant hatch being open is that roof contractors access the roof to look at repairing the guttering between the two parts of the building, and they left it open on re-entering the building. It's now shut and locked, but we don't consider, you know, that comprises a violation of the south plant conditions. And in terms of an odour risk, all of the airflow is from the warehouse to the south plant, not the other way, so we don't consider that it would have represented any risk of odour release during the time it was open. Next slide, please. So this is just the same picture that you've seen before. Our only reason to dwell on this a little bit longer is that you can see the three yellow ones, which are the same ones that was highlighted in the APCD presentation, 2, 5 and 6, the locations adjacent to residences, but I would point out that other than the 3, 4 and 7 locations that are on Newton Ave and the 50, 13, 14, 15 locations on Sickard Street, I don't think there's almost ever been any record of any odour at any of the other locations. So the real focus of odour sensation and control is very localised. That's just what I'm trying to point out. If we can go to the next slide, and I think this is really where we get down to the nitty-gritty of some of the issues we have with, you know, what is being recorded and reported versus, you know, what could potentially be the situation. Each one of these lines here is a different inspector. This is from the APCD records. And I guess our concern in this is a very considerable difference in the level of reporting between inspectors. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism of the inspectors, but it is an indication that if you have an inspector who has a particular view of scales of odour, who's doing the most inspections, you get a very different picture than if you have a different inspector with a different view of scales of odour doing a lot of inspections. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, as the case may be, this Inspector 1 who's records a lot more distinct odours, and there's no difference in timing or pattern or anything else between these inspectors that we've been able to detect. Has done a lot of inspections, but there's another inspector who's also done a lot of inspections, which presents a very different picture. That's Inspector number 3. And Inspector number 2 also generally records less odours, but you'll notice that at location 7, that inspector records higher and increasing frequencies of odours. The top table is the whole year of inspections. The second table is the NOV latest, most recent NOV period, and the third is the second half of the year from the beginning of the most recent NOV period to the end of 2023. And what we know who these inspectors are, obviously. I don't think it's fair to put their names up there or anything, because they're just doing their job as best they can. But the inspector number 2, who records a lot of high distincts at location 7, drives up, waits till a truck begins unloading, records a distinct, and then drives off. Now, if that truck is unloading for 30 minutes in a day, I think that's a very different picture of what odor nuisance level might be than if all day, every day, that odor level was there 24 hours. So that's another issue. All of these observations, we noted that about 85–90% of them are between 9 and 3 o'clock in the day. So that's something of a bias. Don't know whether it would make any difference or not. But it is definitely a weighting in our most active period of the day, and may not reflect what the odor level is at night or at other times when there's less truck activity or things like that. I guess our puzzlement about this is when we look at this, just, blurring your eyes and looking at the amount of green versus, pale orange to red, we would see the middle table, which is the most recent NOV, as a comparatively good period, not a terrible period for odor observations, with the exception of that one inspector. The bottom line, the one that's highlighted, inspector highlighted, called the rest. Those are people who might have only done 1 or 2 inspections in the whole period. And what we noticed about them is that they are reporting odors in the 13, 14, 15 area at a way higher frequency than anyone else, even the most experienced and high reporting inspectors. So that puzzled us as well. And I guess what we felt is they might have been told, okay, here are the places you expect to find odor. And, as people do, that's where they found them. So there's we just have a concern that there's a lot of variability here. There's obvious sort of potential for bias based on how they're instructed. We know that we have a sort of a compliance expectation of distinct, and these are all about the frequency of distinct and higher odors, not faint. But we're not really clear on what this means in terms of how well we're actually doing. And it does make it difficult to look at. And it's the bottom 2 parts of those table. The first line under the black is the total, and the next line is the total if you only had the non-high reporting regular inspector and the people who occasionally come. And it's quite a substantially different picture if you compare those two. It's like almost double level of distinct and higher odors at a lot of locations by the group of inspectors you have to look at. Now, this is probably exactly what you'd expect, but it does make our situation difficult. We're out there checking odors every day. We have obviously our own mindset about what an odor is and what's distinct, faint, and what might be a nuisance. But we don't know what standard we're actually trying to achieve. But the other thing is that the 46 complaints that the APCD noted, which should come within 2023, of those, only about 15 are actually associated with a subsequent inspection and record of a distinct odor adjacent to property. So are those people detecting an odor that's something to do with us or something else, or is it really a nuisance odor, or is it faint or very faint? I don't know. And what constitutes a nuisance in any case in those situations. Next slide, please. So the other, I mean, the sort of next level of this is, you know, trying to work out where we go with this. So we know that, you know, there's a massive literature of this on this, and I'm not an expert on, I can just look things up as well as anyone else. But we know that people's sensitivity to odor is different. We know that perceived intensity can be affected by what you're told is you're going to smell, and we know that exposure to odors changes perception and smelling behaviour, and that's, you know, obviously something we have to consider as well as anyone else. One of the really important things is, you know, when you're told that something is going to be a bad odour, then the likelihood of reporting a higher intensity is much greater than if you're told it's a called a neutral odour. And that's a fairly well demonstrated thing. Next slide, please. So I won't go over this again, but we do have this quite considerable variation in patterns of reporting between inspectors coming at roughly the same times a day with roughly the same frequency and roughly the same exposure to our activities. And there's these difference in patterns between people who are not regular inspectors, and that's probably not unexpected. Next slide, please. So this brings us now to the term frequent. It's used a lot in the NOVs, frequent and distinct. I mean, we would say that frequent is something that you are as likely as or not to encounter at least, but probably more likely than not to encounter would be our sort of understanding of frequent. And we just feel that these reporting intensities seen are not consistent with frequent. And if you go to the next slide, this is during the year, the frequency or percentage of distinct or higher odours adjacent to residents for each month. On the very right-hand side, that hash observation is the number of observations that from the records that's conveyed by the APCD to us in that. And I guess, you know, is 4% frequent? You know, is that's 1 or 2 days in a month, or observations in a month? Is 5% frequent? Maybe 25% is frequent. But what you find is that half of those were all on one day. You know, maybe 12% frequent, but if all of them were in 3 days of a month, is that frequent? In October, you know, we've got 2 days with distinct odours reported only. So, you know, this is another question we have. If we're going to get a violation for distinct and frequent odours, is this the standard? Because it's a very, very severe one. And I would just draw attention for the board again to the months of June to August on the table. That's the period of the latest NOV. And it would seem to me that on balance for the year, it was actually a pretty good period for distinct odours adjacent to residences. Next slide, please. So this is one of the concerns that we have. I raise this because this is something I have a personal prior experience to, is that as the range of exposure and the frequency of one type or another exposure changes, so does people's scale adapt to the new range. I worked in a business once, and this is just purely an anecdotal example, but I bring it to the point of illustration, where the product we produced was a slightly off-white material, and it went into construction materials, and it was highly valued, not because of its other construction material properties, which were just average, but because of this colour and the resulting effect it had on the finished concrete. and we had a complex sourcing arrangement for this material, which required the source colours to be identified. The human eye is probably one of the best grayscale meters that exists, and we use that, but what we found is that if we had a period of whiter source material, the scale that the operators would use would adapt to that. And what we had to do is we had to make them every second or third day go and sit in a room and calibrate their eye back to the original scale again, so that they could do make, sort of not just very precise, but also accurate classifications of colour of that material. It worked fine when you could do that calibration, but without it, they definitely wanted to the white side if we had a white period, or to the black side if we had a black period, or in range if we had a bigger range or smaller range. And that's our concern, is that as we improve our odor control performance, all that happens is that very strong becomes what used to be something between faint and distinct, and everything else follows down from that. And we're in a sort of a position where we can never get to a full elimination of what we consider nuisance odors. Next slide, please. So I guess our point in this is that, we seem to be even though we don't have a sort of a definite compliance standard that's objective or numerical, we have this sort of conditional or subjective compliance standard. We are held to it tightly and in an increasingly severe way. And that's of real concern to us. We don't know how to find a way out of that. We also just need to understand what is frequent. And, if 2 or 3 days a month is frequent, or 1 day a month is frequent, then, we have a different type of a problem to deal with than if frequent has its normal, what we would understand its normal meaning to be. And now we have, and this is with the recommendation of the APCD, we've engaged someone who's like an ODA professional who hopefully has some objectivity, like the calibrated eye, in terms of the types, nature of odors and how to deal with them, and what they consider their somewhat objective level assessment is relative to other odor issues that have been dealt with within the district or within the area of that person's operation. And we're hoping to get a report from them this month that will maybe help provide a more sort of useful calibration of things than my anecdotal stories. And I think it will also, I hope, be of assistance to the APCD in working out whether the measures that we are proposing to implement are going to be effective or not. Next slide, please. So, can we just get back to no, we're done now. So here's everything we've done, and this is perhaps my little reaction to the fact that we've been reactive rather than actively implementing things. We have done a lot of things in 2023, not considerable trouble and expense. I will go into detail of the odor canister soon, but we have done a lot of things during the year to try not only to improve our performance, but also to remedy some of the issues that have arisen during the year. If you go to the next slide, please. So here is the history of the canister. We ordered it prior to any requirement by the APCD in April. We were given a delivery date of the end of June, complete and all ready to run. Late in June, we were advised that the main fan was delayed. We advised the APCD that it would be another week. We're advised on the day before, the end of that period that it wasn't going to be delivered until the beginning of August. But we had to have the fan running the next day, so we bought and installed a fan with exactly the same capacity, a different type of fan, maybe with somewhat less effectiveness, not sure, but we bought and installed another fan, exactly the same capacity onto the unit. We did eventually get our fan delivered. Unfortunately, the supplier managed to complete their usefulness by delivering it to a vacant lot somewhere in San Diego. I haven't putting someone else's completely different address on it. So it took a while for us to find it. I would point out that the only reason the APCD had a picture of it in their slides is because I took the inspector when he came on that day and showed him the fan and explained why it was delayed to be installed. The reason it had a further delay after it was delivered is that when it was delivered, we found that it was a 480 volt fan, not a 240 volt fan. And so we then had to build an entire 480 volt supply to that unit, 5 breakers, build a local control panel for 480 volts. And that took a considerable amount of time and another $2,000 to get done before we could install that fan and commission it on the 15th of September. So I just want to perhaps try and soften the fact that we were somehow neglectful or deliberately not doing something. Our intention was always to get that fan in its proper condition as soon as possible. Next slide, please. And I just want to explain the makeshift guard. The interim fan, we were concerned that it had, despite its capacity, its airflow velocity at the intake was lower, and the whole purpose of that makeshift guard was just to reduce the amount of sideways inflow into that unit. It was not designed to have that fitting on it originally. The original arm also was not ideal in its reach, and we've since also changed that. The reason we never used that unit at South Plant, if you've seen the picture and you'll see in the next pictures, it's a very tall, thin unit, and moving it with a forklift between north and south just wasn't safe. It's got to go over driveway entrances and things like that, and we just didn't want it falling off in the middle of the street or tipping a forklift over or something like that. So we instead commissioned an outlet that we had already had installed at the very beginning on the RS to allow that intake to be adapted for truck vacuum exhaust. And there's a picture of that later on. Next slide, please. So one of the things that's on our next list of coming up improvements was actually finished is we've put a solid material and higher level on our entire front fence. And that means that the wind can no longer filter through the fence during daytime operation. So when we have our gates closed and with that fence in place, we have noticed that there's now much less likelihood of odor even directly at our gate during truck loading or unloading operations. There's the RS with its proper fan and the new arm, which is 50% longer and allows a lot more, I guess, variations in positioning. And that's its current status at the moment. Next slide, please. Just a comment on the screening, solid screening. We now have solid metal lids on all our solid screening equipment. It's not perfectly sealed, but it's way more sealed than it was. We found that we had Perspex lids before so that we could see what was happening, but we just found them extremely difficult to maintain. They tended to break when being shifted for maintenance and things like that. So we had new ones manufactured out of aluminum. Water treatment ceiling, I think we probably went a little bit further than the intent of any understanding with the APCD. We actually solid sealed most of the opening water treatment, which is a shiny bit in that picture. We have the plastic strip curtain, but to be honest, plastic strip curtain is not a great solution, and we are looking at how we can fit a permanent solid door with a spring closure on that. It's just, those strip things, if it's windy, they get blown out of the space. If someone's going to take something in, they get knocked to the side. It's just really a bit of a nuisance. Next slide, please. We have made other changes to south. We blocked the skylight, the offending skylight in the warehouse. We replaced the door between the warehouse and south plant that we used to move equipment through, which is bigger, with a solid new roller door. We purchased a smoke machine and ran it in the south building, and went and sealed all the leaks, and ran the smoke machine again, went and sealed any remaining leaks. We removed the damper in the odor control system, and the damper is there for the purpose of startup. When you have a high draft, induced draft fan and it starts up, it can draw a lot of current. There is potential to overload the motor, and that's normally why you have a damper there, but because we have a soft start mechanism on that, we don't really need the damper, so we removed it because it does reduce air by about 10%. We also replaced the carbon as required under the permit for south in November, but we went back to a standard carbon loading because we'd never had any suggestion of odour emission from the OCS. We went back to a standard carbon loading where previously we'd had it about 20% higher than normal. And the only reason we did that is because we had half a bag of carbon left over when we finished charging. And that has dropped the static pressure differential and allowing for an additional increase in airflow. And you'll see on the right-hand side there, it's not very clear, but that black and yellow striped hose there is a flexible hose connected to a duct which feeds, you can see there outlined where that feeds into the odor control system. Next slide, please. Water treatment permit. The delay in that permit is exactly the same problem that we had with the original permit for the odor control system and South Plant is that I understand the APCs need to tick all their boxes, but we had to do a volatile organics assessment, and it's actually very difficult to get an appropriate representative sample in the right place to measure that, and it has to go to a particular type of laboratory that's been collected in a special way and acid treated and refrigerated and a whole lot of other stuff. And that's just been the same slow process. It is with the testing people and our consultants expecting those results anytime, but that's what we're waiting for. It's the same problem. I don't think we have any disagreements with where the APCD want to go in the types of conditions and things that they want to see on that permit. I don't think that the volatile organics results are going to make any difference whatsoever to anything that we do. However, they are a requirement of the permitting process, so we have to do it. Next slide, please. So continuing operations, just to I'll be absolutely clear on what's what. We've been through the fact that our south process, we're not now making feedstock for biodiesel, which is a high, require a lot of material. We're only processing collected material, and we are not now doing the flash evaporation and centrifuge. The processing volumes at water treatment will decrease, but as I think is clear in what there was an APCD presentation, the need for odour management is pretty much unchanged. The volume that came out of the biodiesel plant into water treatment was not really a significant odour source material. The other thing I just want to clarify is that we will be moving some rendered oil between the two facilities to make use of the storage at the north plant, but that will be a very much lower volume than we had before, and it is captured in the truck volume that we have outlined to the APCD. And the last thing is that in the 12-hour operation, we may have an offset between the two facilities. So our plan at the moment is to, and that's related to the timing of trucks coming back with material. So we have a requirement to make a certain amount of space by a certain amount of time at the south plant. So the south plant will probably start operation at 4 o'clock in the morning and finish at 4. For the water treatment plant, that preparation has to be done by the end of the day because the grease trap trucks generally come back and deliver very early in the morning. So that plant will probably just run 6 to 6 or 7 to 7. So there will be a little bit of offset. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of the things that we're going to do. One of them's done, which is the installation of that solid lining to the north fence. Now, what we have observed is a major problem with the truck transfer and capturing vacuum pump exhaust or venting is that you don't need a lot of wind to have the potential for odour release around. I mean, you have to have a huge amount of air volume to overcome any level of wind above a fairly small amount. So what we want to do is to enclose the trucks completely in a house would require permitting, that would take a very long time to do. So what we're proposing is to build flexible but impervious hoods that can go over the top of a truck that's been loaded or under a truck that's using its vacuum pump, surround the whole vacuum pump unit, including the exhaust and everything to do with it, and then connect the odour canister to that. And that will just prevent wind from being able to get at that place where the odour is coming out. We're getting the designs finalised now. We'll show them to the APCD and see if they think that's okay, and then we'll get some built and tried promptly so that we can be confident they're going to work if we're going to put them into future conditions. For the water treatment building, we are going to look at doing leak testing in the water treatment building. We don't really know whether it's a significant source of odour or not, but if we're going to bother putting a door in it, it's worth just checking that there's no other major places where if there is odour that it could be released. We're looking at ways to cover our cavitation air flotation device, which we use to separate grease and solids from the water prior to discharging to the city. I mean, it is also potentially a source of odour, but we're not sure whether it ever gets outside the building. And the last thing we're looking at doing is putting passive carbon canisters for the venting of those tanks inside the water treatment. So as they're filled and discharged, any air coming in or out of them goes through a canister with carbon, activated carbon in it, the same that's in the odour control system in a portable canister. And I think the rest of it we've already discovered. If the covers work for the water treatment plant, we'll use them south as well. We're going to do the leak check regularly at South Plant. And we're also, because of our modifications at South Plant, some of the previous tank venting we had arranged to try and bring it to the inlet of the odor control system. This is just going to the building, has been disconnected. And so we're maybe looking at a similar type of system of just having a small passive canister attached to the venting of the tanks as they get building in South Plant as well. So last slide. So as my statements earlier, we just feel like the NOVs are not really a fair representation of what is actually happening and has happened, and particularly the last NOV for the period it was issued, we don't believe that it's a fair representation of the odor levels and exposure in the neighbourhood during that period. I've explained that we're not trying to delay water treatment permitting, but there's no point in us submitting sample procedures and data that aren't going to meet the requirement, and it's taken some time again to find a lab and a process that is going to give us those data. I think that we feel that we are getting somewhere. We do believe genuinely that those November, December much lower odor report levels are a reflection of the change in activity and the improvements we've made at South. And I guess our goal in this, and we appreciate the fact that the APCD are working with us, is to try to get to a point where any modifications to the South permit and a new permit for water treatment and any modifications to the existing North permit, which didn't really have anything to do with odor, that was for the biodiesel plant emissions, are able to have a set of sensible, sustained conditions and reporting that provide the APCD with what they need to know what's going on, and that controls and practices are in place, and that we can have a long-term set of measures in place and eventually get to a point where we don't need to sort of work from stipulated or abatement order to modified order, etc. We have a long-term arrangement. So that's our aim, and working with them and hoping to have something a lot closer to that for the first month of this period. Thank you.
Well, I think, great. Thank you for your presentation. I think a number of new issues were raised that weren't brought up before that I think the district should be allowed to comment on before we get into more questions. So if you have any additional comments, any additional comments following this presentation.
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments. We've been working together for over 2 years on these orders, and so with this most recent update today, there's just a lot to really, unpack, I guess, from the last 6 months, where over the summer in August, I think it was the height of it, the odor problem was worsening. And I think we both presented, facts about those investigations and what some of those odors were. The current status, though, I think is maybe a little bit more, significant to focus on, because we do agree on the points of odor sources being truck activity. We have had frequent meetings. We met 2 or 3 times in November, twice in December, once in January already. We'll be meeting again in February. So that's more of the current status, and I just want to explain that that's where we're at right now. We can talk about some of the other issues that Chris brought up, the differences in inspectors and whatnot. We're basing our data on, factual observations from a variety of different people, and we're following our policies on that. And and just to further clarify, when we discuss distinct level, that's really just for the purpose of being brief. No one here has any, argument about distinct being a problem. So it's a simple way to just get across our idea. This is clearly a problem. So I don't really want to mention anything about the frequency issue that Chris brought up. I think that it doesn't really serve us for where we're at right now. But to clarify, we did have 6 distincts in October and 2 in November. And then in December, I think we had 0 and 0 so far in January. So that's currently where we're at, and, moving forward, we also both agree on meeting again on March 21st. And we would hope that we can work together just on our own and solve some of these issues and get the corrective actions implemented. Updates to the portable carbon canister and the trucking closures and some of the, things that we're working on. And then be in a better spot in March, so.
Or any questions from members of the board for either the district or the
I do have a couple questions. First of all, the most recent odor complaint was on January 2nd, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and before that, what was the most recent complaint?
we didn't have any in December.
Okay,
Um,
so sometime in November then. I don't need a specific date, but I'm assuming it's,
yeah, we did have complaints in November, as well. I know that 2 of those were, at the state. And let me take a look at my complaint slide here. Yeah, so I think it was 2 in November, 0 in December, and then 1 in January.
okay. And I'm curious, and then just to kind of rehash, I think we've been through this before, but the district's response when there's an odor complaint is like, maybe I should be more specific. On January 2nd, what was the district's response to the odor complaint? What actions were taken?
We dispatched an inspector, as quickly as we can to be on the scene. That's important so that they can try in real time observe what the complainant is observing.
Mhm.
So to the best of the ability, we attempt to do that. And then, they would follow the, odor route, which has the 20, locations. So that's, a very consistent process. Some of those, points are, as Chris pointed out, no odor points. That's sort of by design. We want to be able to have a baseline and track it. So,
Right.
that's part of our process. And then, the results are shared with New Leaf, as quickly as can, usually within 24 hours, that inspector will let them know. And more recently, at the request of New Leaf, if we do find a distinct or higher, the inspector will try and contact, whoever's available at New Leaf and, bring it to their attention immediately so they can go and observe themselves.
Okay.
And then, after that, they just document the results.
And do you know how long after the January 2nd odor complaint the inspector was out?
I don't know exactly. I'd have to look into that.
Okay.
But we typically respond, within 24 hours, but that's, typically it's much shorter duration than that because we do have an after hours complaint program.
Okay, and that was one of the other questions I had was, and let's focus more on the more recent complaints, November and forward. Are they typically daytime complaints? Do you have time of day for the complaints?
We do track that information for each complaint and each odor survey that's done as a follow-up. So yes, we have all of the times that the odor surveys are conducted and the complete response times.
Okay.
If we receive a complaint after our typical working hours, we do dispatch the after hours inspector to address the problem and to do an odor survey.
Okay. Then the other question I had is whether I don't know if this is relevant for this plant. There are different qualities of smells. You've got sulfur dioxide smells like burnt matches, and hydrogen sulfide smells like rotten eggs. So everybody knows sort of a paint solvent smell. Are the odors pretty much all of the same quality, or are there different types of odors that are being reported coming from this plant?
There are about 3 or 4 odors that our inspectors have identified, repeatedly. Sour, rancid, vinegar, sour. Those are some of the descriptors that they've documented.
Okay. I'm just curious if that is helpful at all to the plan, and this is more a question for New Leaf, whether the type of odor obviously hopefully could inform somewhat where that odor is coming from, if that's somewhat informing your
No, I mean,
measures.
I don't want to, in all my concerns about the data and how it's interpreted, that's a regulatory point of view. I mean, generally, we have a good relationship. In fact, I can't think of a situation where we haven't had a good relationship with inspectors, whether they come on site or don't, or tell us what they're smelling or not. So we have a pretty good idea. I mean, the oil processing is the sour, rancid, vinegary type of odor. If you smell used cooking oil of varying ages, you know exactly what that smell is. For grease trap, that is a totally different thing. I mean, you know, grease trap is a seriously smelly stuff. And that's why the collection is done in the middle of the night, because restaurants don't want it done during the day. And, you know, we have to be a lot more careful with that material to make sure that, it's not causing odor. And the real risk is during truck handling activities. All the rest of the time is essentially inside sealed tanks and not available for creating odor issues.
Okay.
But that is, that's the hydrogen sulfide plus, sort of rotten, type of smell. It's not quite a distinct type of odor from the used cooking oil odor.
Okay. The, one other question just came up for me was, I know that there are different ways that facilities interact with the community. Some don't get calls at all, or the community doesn't call them, and others get calls directly from the community in addition to whether or not they call the APCD. Are you having direct contact with the public, the ones that are, and specifically the people who are probably right across the street that have the biggest concern about the odors?
Well, I mean, we have offered to people to contact us directly anytime they like, but they don't.
Okay.
I mean, some of the people we are aware of regularly making complaints are people that over years of being neighbours, staff members have routine, chat, hello, how you going, type discussions with on a daily basis. They now don't talk to us, or they still sometimes say hi, but they never communicate about odor issues.
Okay.
Same with the retirement location. We had complaints about truck traffic and beepers and lights at night and idling and those sorts of things. Never anything about odor, and they've never made an odor complaint, with perhaps one exception, one individual person exception, over the entire time since it started in November. So, I mean, we can't compel people to talk to us.
Of course.
We understand if they feel uncomfortable about it. And I mean, we're not trying to deny that they're smelling something. We're just not always sure that it's from us.
Yeah, that's why we asked APCD to call this cell phone number if they have a distinct. So that's happened since November. And in November, they did call that number and said they had distinct. One of our employees immediately dispatched. They sat outside together and tried to identify the smell. In that particular instance, I don't think you talked about that one, Mary. Our employees didn't smell something that was related to our plant. So there was a different, we couldn't identify what the smell was. We thought maybe it was something from the shipyards.
It smelled more like paint from the shipyards.
Yeah, it smelled more like paint. So that was a distinct odor. It was great though that our employee was able to get there right away, so that when the report happens, we're able to say, okay, we smell that too, but that's not something that we can go fix. Whereas if they smelled it and they knew it was related to grease trap, then they can come inside and say, something's going on around the grease trap. Let's go look at it, see if we can figure out how to, reduce that smell.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a quick question. Did you say you guys ran any operations there, Shin?
Biodiesel was closed. We closed our biodiesel plant. We laid off 26 people, and that's finished. But and we are, I think we mentioned before, we are looking at looking for a new location for the remaining activities, but that's with all the normal problems you've got when you find 5 locations for these things. People want done, but don't want done next to them.
That's right.
But we are actively searching, and there is a process that we intend to complete. It's not something that's going to go on forever.
That is it.
Right, and my 2 questions you both asked, so. All right, so let's proceed to the call on public speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. As a reminder to members of the public wishing to address the board today, I will be calling speakers by name or the last four digits of their phone number. You will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. At that time, you will need to press *6 to unmute your phone. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the audio record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please regulate your time. I will ask that you conclude your comments when your time has ended. I will remind the speakers to mute their live stream before they begin speaking. Our first and only caller, it will be Nicolas Paul. Nicolas Paul, will you please unmute your phone and state your name for the audio record?
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Good morning, everyone. Nicolas Paul with the Environmental Health Coalition. I just wanted to call in today and express our appreciation to the work of APCD inspectors in Barrio Logan and for the presentations today by APCD staff and New Leaf staff. In conversation with residents, I think they've documented some improvement, and I think that's reflected in both APCD and New Leaf's presentations. They have, however, been adamant that the problem has not been solved completely. And so, I think that's reflected again in the presentations with the recent report in early January. And so, I wanted to call and say, we support the recommendation to continue this hearing process until the spring. I think in the past, we've heard that towards the winter months, there's kind of like this natural lull. At least last year there was in the production process at New Leaf. And so I think it would be really great to kind of see, kind of compare apples to apples, right? I think there's been a huge change in the operation at New Leaf as far as them stopping the biofuel production process in their operation. But, I think continuing to monitor, that happened in mid-December. And so really we've been observing things for about a couple weeks now. It's only been a few weeks until that big change happened. And so I recommend that we continue having another hearing to hear more updates, give residents an opportunity to continue to monitor and elevate issues in the coming months. And yeah, I hope you all take that recommendation seriously and have another hearing in the spring. Thank you so much.
That concludes public comment for petition 4527.
Okay, so the public comment period for 4527 is now closed, and the board will now proceed discussion on this item update. And I'll just solicit any comments or thoughts and then give my
So I don't have any additional comments at this time.
everyone.
I guess I don't have any additional discussion about this item either.
Okay, yeah, I mean, clearly this has been a very active matter, that there has been a lot going on. I'm glad that we were able to hear from someone who was able to present the perspective of the public. That I agree that we're better than we were, but not quite where we need to be. So I'm glad that we've landed in a rather collaborative place between New Leaf and the district. And yeah, I would agree with that recommendation that we take another report on in the springtime.
Actually, I do have one comment I'd like to make to direct it at New Leaf, and that is, you are completely entitled to give a full-throated defense against the NOV assertions, those sorts of things. And I appreciate the information that you conveyed. One of the comments you made during the, I would call it a defense, was that, there's this question about how frequent is, and how strong an odor does it have to be before it's not relevant anymore, or is not a problem anymore. And I guess I would implore you to continue to think about the residents that are right across the street. And that's an unfortunate location for your operation, that they're right downwind and they're right across the street. That makes it very low threshold essentially for there to be a nuisance complaint, because there's not time for the air to disperse. But if I were living across the street from the plant and I was getting odor problems that were bothering me multiple times a month, that's pretty frequent as far as I'm concerned. I'm not making a legal distinction, I'm just talking about, like, if you're putting yourself in the shoes of the person across the street from the plant. I would urge you to be sort of thinking about that as not necessarily a legal threshold, but as a member of the community, and thinking about making sure that the lives of the members of that community are as high quality as possible, and that you're not creating a detriment to their ability to live in that community. So that's not necessarily relevant to our decision, but I guess I would urge you to be thinking about that and, continuing to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just explain our position on that, if that's acceptable to the board. I mean, our standard that we're aiming for is no odor on site. Our question is, from a legal point of view, where do we stand and who is the arbiter of what's a nuisance and what's not? Is it a complaint? Is it a certain inspector or another inspector or a cohort? And is it faint? Is it distinct? I mean, from a legal point of view, where do we stand and how do we know when we're doing what's needed not to be get an NOV and when we're on the other side? But I agree with you totally on, I mean, from a community neighbour point of view, our standard is to have no odors on site, then they can't go off site.
And I will commend you on the fact that I'm hearing from all fronts that things are improving, that you are putting quite a bit of effort and investment into controlling the odors to improve the situation. Obviously, there's a bit of work to go, and I guess we'll be hearing, I'm assuming we're going to be hearing some more. I guess we'll be deciding that shortly.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I've got for comments.
All right, well, then, thank you. Is there a motion to accept the update and also to schedule an additional update with potential for action on March 21st?
I so move.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Good. All right. So there's a motion by member Engelmann to accept and a second by member Gonzalez. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Just to clarify that the motion would be to accept today's update and to schedule an additional update for March 21st.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
I would add with the possibility of taking additional action should the board deem it necessary.
Thank you for the clarification. Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Member Engelmann?
Aye.
Dr. Spencer?
Aye.
That motion passes. Well, that motion passes to accept today's update and to schedule an additional update with the possibility of taking additional board action for March 21st, 2024. With all members present voting aye, with the exception of Vice Chair Schlick and Chair Rodriguez, who are not present for today's meeting.
All right. And before we move on to the next matter, I'm going to suggest that I
I think on stage. We'll reset and return at 10:58.
Thank you. Yeah, and that one obviously is going on for a long time.
Yeah, if you're here in 2 years, yours will be going that long too.
That's definitely not the plan.
The time is now 10:59 and we have reconvened for the remainder of the hearing board meeting.
Okay, terrific. So before we begin discussion on petition 539, Bimbo Bakeries US, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board on petition 4531 today?
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. We have received no requests from members of the public to address the board today. However, I'll go ahead and share the access information. Those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the teleconference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to provide comment.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Clerk. As is customary, we'll take the presentation from APCD staff, then the respondent presentation from representatives from Bimbo Bakeries USA, and then any members of the public that wish to address the hearing board today.
Thank you very much. Good morning. For the record, my name is Day McGee-Hill. I'm a civil actions investigator with the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. And Clerk Ruthier is bringing up my presentation,
Just 1 moment.
which is considerably shorter.
There we go. I believe there you go.
I will be presenting background information related to petition 4539, the district comments on each of the required findings, and the district's position. Next slide, please. Bimbo Bakeries USA Incorporated is a commercial bakery located at 2069 Adder Road Avenue in Escondido. Bimbo Bakeries USA Incorporated is requesting a 90-day variance from 2 district rules until March 1st, 2024. They must repair leaks in the ducting prior to their catalytic oxidizer. Petitioner is requesting relief from District Rule 21, permit condition number 8, of permit APCD 2006-PTO-951149. This permit condition requires that process equipment shall be maintained and operated so that there is no leakage of air contaminants to the atmosphere prior to their treatment in the catalytic oxidizer. Similarly, petitioners are seeking relief from District Rule 67.24, Section D2, Roman numeral II, which requires that ducting shall be maintained so as to be free of visible holes, breaks, openings, or separations between adjoining components from which volatile organic compounds may be emitted to the atmosphere. Next slide, please. I will now give a summary of events related to the petition. On September 20th of 2023, district testing staff identified an inlet flow leak to the catalytic oxidizer during a source test. At that time, the facility was notified of the leak. During an inspection on Friday, December 15th, district inspectors identified 10 leaks along the ducting leading to the catalytic oxidizer using an Eagle handheld multi-gas detector. Because of the leaks and unrelated record keeping, the petitioner received a notice of violation, which was reissued with rule and permits section clarifications on December 21st. On Monday, December 18th, the petitioner submitted a breakdown notification related to the leaks. It was not considered a valid breakdown as the district was not notified within 2 hours of discovery. Later the same day, the petitioner also submitted preliminary versions of emergency variance petition 4538 and today's petition 4539. The complete petitions were submitted the next day. On Thursday, December 21st, the emergency variance petition 4538 was withdrawn, and on Friday, December 22nd, petitioner indicated that repairs were scheduled. On January 2nd and again on January 9th, petitioner updated the district that some but not all repairs are complete. Next slide, please. To help visualize the leaks, here are a few photos of the leaks taken during the district December 15th inspection. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I will now give a brief summary of the petitioner's recent compliance history. In the last 6 years, the petitioner has submitted one additional breakdown notification in May of 2023. The May breakdown was related to the thermal oxidizers, not the ducting. The petitioner has not received any notices of violations for similar situations, but did receive notices of violations in the year 2021, 2020, and 2017 for unrelated testing, tuning, and reporting issues. The district has not received any complaints about the facility. Next slide. I will now, according to the California Health and Safety Code, section 42352, in order to grant a variance, 6 findings must be made. In this case, the district does not believe all of the findings can be made and thus opposes granting a 90-day variance. I will now briefly share the district's comments about each finding. Finding A, violation status. The district believes that the petitioner has been and would be in violation of the requested rules unless they repair the leaks or stop operations. Finding B requires that conditions be found to be beyond the reasonable control of the petitioner. The district believes that given the rusted condition of the ducting, the identification of a leak by district source testing in September, and the number of leaks identified during the December inspection, that it was within the petitioner's control to proactively assess, identify, and repair leaks in the ducting earlier, and in such a way to minimize disruptions and loss of revenue. Next slide. Finding C requires that taking or closing would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. Since the leaks are in the ducting before the control equipment, the volatile organic compound emissions being discussed are uncontrolled and fugitive in nature. An exact emission estimate is therefore not available. To clarify, an issuance of notice of violation is not a request for a closing of the entire facility. The district also notes that the petitioner is not seeking relief from the 50-ton per year annual VOC emissions requirement, which is a Title V threshold. California Health and Safety Code 42350, Section B2 explains that Title V sources shall not be granted variances from permit requirements. Finding D requires that the petitioner has given consideration to curtailing operations of the source in lieu of obtaining a variance. The district notes that in May of 2023, the bakery did shut down production relating to their previous breakdown notification without requesting a variance. Thus, the district asks for clarification about what curtailing operations and repair efforts have been considered and conducted instead of requesting a variance. Next slide, please. Finding E requires the petitioner will reduce excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible during the period of the variance is in effect. The district asks if temporary repairs can be made to the ducts until a more permanent solution can be completed, or if other emission reductions are feasible. Finding F pertains to emissions record keeping, and in addition, a variance cannot create nuisances. The district acknowledges that no complaints have been received at this time, and that the facility is not near schools or residences. Next slide. To summarize, the district opposes the granting of petition 4539 because the leaks and repairs were not clearly beyond reasonable control. That is finding B. And more information is needed about curtailing operations and repair efforts instead of requesting a variance. That is finding D. This concludes the district's prepared statements. Any questions?
Is there any specific information you want to get from the respondent about item D? Any specific items you'd like them to address so they can make sure to include it in the presentation?
I believe they have updated their presentation since the packet was put together, so I would like to actually see that updated presentation.
Any other questions at this time, or shall we wait for?
I can hold my tongue for now.
All right, well, let's go ahead and hear from, respondent Bimbo Bakeries USA.
If I may, Chair, if I may, Dr.
Yeah,
Spencer,
you can-
we did receive an updated, presentation on Wednesday, the tenth, from Ms. Stephanie Harris. That has not been distributed to the hearing board. The original was distributed, with the agenda packet, so, we will need to take that into consideration.
All right, so it sounds like we'll be accepting a presentation. Does anybody have a question or a comment or want to make a motion to accept?
I don't have any concerns accepting the revised presentation. So I'll move that we accept.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, now, clerk, will you please call the roll.
And as a clarification, I think there's only one additional slide from what was in that.
But whenever there's any new information.
No,
that
just
has
as a
previously been submitted, we have to vote to accept it.
Yeah.
For the purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
member Engelmann,
Aye.
Dr. Spencer.
Aye.
The motion passes to accept the, Bimbo Bakeries USA Inc. Updated presentation submitted on January tenth. And that will be labeled in the public record as Exhibit 8.
Right, please go ahead.
All right, so my name is Freddie Ugarte and I am the regional manager, for Bimbo Bakeries USA. So yeah, here,
Just one moment, you have to share it.
all right, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, so our Escondido facility, produces, bread and buns, and they distribute throughout, Southern California. And we have some permanent equipment at the facility. We have some ovens, and an oxidizer, a few other, equipments there. And our catalytic oxidizer, pretty much is there for the VOCs, like ethanol from, the baking of bread. The exhaust system is inspected quarterly. That's the oxidizer. Most recently on October 18th, 2023, there was an inspection for that. And then the facility is minor, non-Title V facility. Next slide. So again, routinely we conduct these inspections. So in October, there was no leaks identified. So then next there's a source test that was done by APCD in September that determined that the oxidizer was actually properly operating and passed the source test. San Diego APCD enforcement first identified the possible leaks in the oven vent ducting during the inspection in December 15th, 2023. The inspector notified Bimbo at the conclusion of the site inspection that VOC's readings using a PID suggested that there was leaks at a damper closed, the opening closed damper. And from my understanding, that was verbally told to the maintenance staff there. Next slide, please. So here's a timeline of how when the NOV was first issued, December 15th, APCD was on site and they used the PID on our ducting and issued violation. Right after we found out about the violation, the facility quickly reached out to vendors that same day and coordinated on-site review of what's to do for the project to get these fixes that were mentioned in the NOV. So then the facility filed for a variance on the 18th. And then our source test was done September 20th, which they mentioned they found these leaks at the inlet damper area.
You said September, did you mean December 20th?
No.
Sorry, so I know it's not up there, so the source test was conducted in September. We received the actual results on the 20th of December, so 3 months later. And the results show as passed. Next, I was working with the APCD, who issued the NOV on, because we were filing for a petition, so I need the right section numbers, and there was a error in their initial NOV, so they had to modify, and reissue a new NOV, after some clarification that we had to go back and forth. So, moving forward, we, continued on, the bakery had scheduled their, repairs. We reached out to a vendor to, rent out a PID to us and, to the facility. So, cause, we, don't have a PID, so we needed to get one to determine where the leaks are found, that, APCD, mentioned. And then the facility repairs began the day before Christmas Eve. And of course, during the holidays, staff was in, time off, so it was hard to get, more repairs scheduled with the vendor. But we have those scheduled, this week and potentially next week. If everything, weather permits and availability doesn't change. And then, yeah, the hearing board is today, so, yeah, next slide, please. So our variance request, so Bimbo is requesting temporary enforcement relief from Rule 67.24, standard and the permit condition 8 as follows. So it's just there, just showing the sections there, for your reference. And then we do just want to emphasize that, that although these leaks were found, that our source test passed, for the source test that was provided in December of 2023. Next slide, please. And then we do have some slides here of our repairs that have been completed so far. There's still some more repairs that need to be done. Next slide, thanks. So here's a repair number one. The pictures on your left, and then you'll see in the next slides, the ones on the left are the ones provided by the APCD NOV. So they have their PID with their sniffer, that's given them some concentration numbers there. And on the right is our repair where they sealed it up, the gasket there. And you can see the picture there, they zoomed in. So that's the inlet damper purge. Next slide, please. So here's the clean out number one on line one. So on the left, that was the initial picture taken from the NOV. On the right is they put an end cap and then sealed it with a gasket there. So next slide, please. This is the next repair that was done. And on the right, you'll see there that they sealed it off in the red and tighten those onto the, I'm sorry, to go back to some clarification. You'll see that there's insulation on the actual pipe. So on the left, that gray is insulation. On the right, that's the pipe that's bare. So same pipe, just without the insulation. Next slide, please.
Actually, before you move on, it feels like we're looking at two different things here, just because there's additional piping coming out from that.
Yeah, so I believe it's from the other side. So you see those two wires on the top?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so so they're.
So we're not looking at the same spot on the pipe, it's the other side.
Start flipped.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, from my understanding from, the staff at the bakery mentioned that it's on the other side of the pipe, cause the leak is this side with the insulation, which possibly could, if there were leak there, come into the other side.
Gotcha.
Next slide, please.
Sorry, real quick, so would the ledge of the roof be on the other side, that's where you can't take a picture of that side?
No, I'm sure, yeah, sure. But just, I mean, these pictures are provided to show you progress, as far as, if it's on the roof, I'm not 100% sure, yeah, next slide. And then again, similar, it's a different clean out, these are all, so they just, sealed it up, put new gasket on there. Next slide, please. So here, the inspection port, there was, as you see there, a leak found, and then those two on the right are the repairs that were done to that, for that leak there. Next slide. And then another, clean out area, so did a similar, repaired it, gasket, and, good there. Next slide. So I believe this is a different, area, so this is the visual inspection port, that was also sealed. And that's, findings on the left and repair on the right. Next slide. And then this was a updated slide here. Here are invoices of what has been expended so far. So the first time on the 24th, the expense was approximately up to 15,000. Could be a little more. And then they have a second repair to be completed this weekend. If all things work out with the vendor, that's gonna run us another $15,000 to $20,000. And then there's gonna be another third time to make sure everything is working correctly. So that this is why we need additional time. It's we can't do this in-house. Similarly to our breakdown that we had in May, where we were able to fix it right away because it was fixed internally, and we had the part internally. So that's the invoices there. On the right is the PID rental. It's just to show you that we have made some progress, and you'll see they reached out. So the vendor came out, assessed the work to be done, and then here's invoice done. You'll see they're dated. So we've been violation was given on the 15th. So we've been doing our best to get this fixed. Next slide, please. So the bakery has repaired more than half of the leaks identified in the NOV. There was approximately 10, I think. So curtailment would directly affect 180 employees and jeopardize 15 million in monthly revenue, wholesale revenue. And then moreover, denial would disrupt the disruption of 4.4 million units of bread and buns within 30 days. So monitoring will be performed using a rented PID to verify that all repair leaks are sealed. And then the bakery expects repairs to be completed by mid-January, assuming no other issues. And then, and then just to note, so anytime, since these are exhaust, production needs to be turned off, shut down, because these pipes are hot. So anytime we do these fixes, we need to shut down production. So it's something to. Okay, and then the final repairs are still being confirmed. It's So, some of the repairs, that are still pending, they need to, the vendor needs to, make a specific part for, an area in the ducting. So, pending when that's ready and then availability to make that repair is why we need that additional time. So Bimbo is requesting that Escondido facility be granted the temporary relief, from further enforcement action until we repair these, areas. So next slide. That's it, great, okay. Hopefully that was too long, right?
Right, and then I'm just gonna add on to that, so he's outlined what's been done, they're proactively working. We're moving forward. I guess actually I should introduce myself. I'm Julie Mitchell with York Engineering, their consultant, air quality consultant. You know, I think the key items to note, is that, curtailment does occur for the repairs. So with regards to finding D, they will have to curtail operations to do the repairs. Operations were curtailed on December 24th, which is actually a pretty peak time for bakery operations. And so they were done so that repairs could be made then. Outside maintenance staff are coming in to do these repairs. So it's a little at their, we're at the mercy of the staff as they come in, these experts, for scheduling and when they may come in. So it's not always available immediately. And as Freddie was saying, there are some parts that need to be purchased. And so that's, you know, a little unknown of when those will be available. And so expecting that should be done in the next 2 months before the March 1st, 90-day variance ending period. Then the other question was why, the other question was on the beyond reasonable control. So there, in October, there was an inspection on the piping up there. Bimbo did not notice any leaks at that given time. Just if there's rust, it doesn't mean it's leaking. It, you know, it's just metals do have rust across them. I think the key item to remember on this one was that they were not informed of any leaks from the September source testing. They were only informed of those during the December 15th site visit. So during the September source testing, they were said that their damper was not in the correct position, and that was repaired pretty much immediately after the September testing. You know, they went in and made sure the damper was in the right position, and that was all dealt with. So that was the only item that was identified due to the September source testing. So once they had an inspection in December and were notified of leaks, you can see in the timeframe that Freddie's outlined that they've been quite reactive on making sure that they fix all of that information. So that's as soon as they knew that there were leaks, and their inspection hadn't shown any leaks. So so we're stating that it is, you know, the beyond reasonable control. They didn't know these were there. There was no way they would have repaired them. Okay, that's the main point.
Okay, so if I may ask, if you're saying that there were no leaks, at least according to the district on September 20th, they identified an inlet flow leak. So can you help me understand why that's not a leak?
That's the damper issue, sorry. That's the damper issue, and that was identified at that particular time and dealt with, you know, fairly promptly.
Sorry, just from the pictures, you can see that there's damage on the, that it doesn't look like it's only rust. You can, I think you can kind of tell that there's like a hole inside the rust. Was that, so that wasn't identified when they went out there and inspected the equipment, or?
Are you talking, so when they inspected the APCD did, or when we did it?
Can you go back to the picture from the district's presentation?
These slide number 4 and 5.
Yeah, so that area, yeah, it looks like, I mean, it looks like pretty substantial. It doesn't look like, the left side looks like maybe just rust. On the right hand side, it looks like there might be like some corrosion in there. That's, you know, So at that time, there was no readings or anything, is that what happened?
So when we, so the ducting you're seeing there, that's the insulation, right? So,
Okay.
yeah, that's the insulation, and then you have your pipe inside, so it's insulated for the heat to stay in, right? And so, if I'm not, from my understanding, we're not like required to have a PID and sniff around. So there was like, we don't like go and sniff around on it, so we didn't, know that there was, leaks there, cause we didn't have one. Until, APCD showed up, December 15th, with their PID. And that's when
It was detected.
right,
Right, and I think, you know, that going back to that, the rule 67.24, you know, specifically states they do inspections and it's looking for visible holes, breaks, openings, and separations. And they didn't see any visible holes.
Right.
You know, what you can detect with a meter can be certainly more than you can detect. You know, they're measuring very small quantities in these, with the PID.
Yes, sir. That was my question. Thank you.
I have a few questions. I usually do. So my first question is, I know that you don't have an overall like PID or anything like that, any kind of drawing schematic that shows the whole airflow system. At the tail end of it, you've got a catalytic oxidizer, correct?
Mhm.
And then you've got a bunch of ducting from various process points that all collect into that catalytic oxidizer. Where is the fan located? Like, I'm wondering if these ducts are under negative pressure or positive pressure.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but these tests were all done on the roof. All the exhaust goes to the oxidizer. Just not sure about.
Okay, and I'm sorry, was anybody from the district at the facility for this? Is there anybody present today that has visited the facility?
I can speak to that a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Nathan Gutschwiller, senior chemist with the source testing, so.
Okay.
I'm the supervisor and my staff are the ones that conducted the source test, so I have been to this facility. I was not there during the September source test.
Okay.
I would have to pull up the source test and report and look, but I believe, the inlet to the oxidizer is under positive static pressure. I have to verify that.
Okay, so.
So the fan is
fans
pushing
are
into the
pushing
oxidizer,
air
I
to
believe
the
so.
oxidizer, which would explain why you're getting PID
Positive
readings
pressure, yes,
with
positive
VOC readings.
Correct, and I believe the outlet of the oxidizer is at that point under negative pressure from, the drop in the oxidizer.
Okay,
With the main issue that was documented, like I said, we didn't document any leaks on any of the ducting work. The main, issue that we saw while we were testing was on, that draft air valve that's close to where we sample at, and there was positive pressure and emissions coming from that point.
okay. What's the purpose of that draft air valve?
They might be able to speak to that more. I think it's.
The damper?
Yeah, the damper. I don't know.
I asked it's a damper. The damper is used to open and close for safety. I believe they use it when, starting up the oxidizer.
So it sounds like it's a damper that's normally closed.
Correct,
But
yes.
during certain circumstances, it can be opened on an exceptional basis, or is it even on a routine basis? Like maybe during startup and shutdown, during startup, it sounds
I
like?
believe so. It's more of a safety thing than,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's not supposed to be open during normal operation?
Right.
Okay, and then, so the district in September detected that damper having some kind of leak or being open, and that situation was remedied in September after the facility was notified?
Not to my knowledge. It was not, fixed the day we were there. I do not.
Right, the facility made a statement that they, once they knew about it, they took action and resolved it. Do you know approximately how long it took to?
I believe at that time, and, the site staff were verbally like, hey, there's some leak here, and I think it's also in the report. I can bring it up real quick to make sure, but they just closed, they made sure it was closed, cause you can open and close it, so.
So there were no repairs done, it was just a matter of it being open and it just needed to be closed? Like,
Yes.
there wasn't a gasket replaced or anything like that?
Right, I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Member Engelmann, the district has additional.
I'm sorry,
Just from our perspective there, right, we wanted to verify that it was closed prior to testing, right? Because we knew that we were seeing a positive pressure leak.
Okay,
And so it was verified closed, but that did not change the observation that it was visible, not visibly, but that it was leaking.
okay.
But it was verified closed by the facility.
And did the district came out and monitored on the 15th of December?
That was not our group, that was from inspections, from
Okay.
from the compliance group.
Do we know if that spot was monitored and whether any leaks were found?
It was not specific, not to that level of specifics. I do not have the descriptors of the 10 leaks to that level of specification.
What kind of, so this facility, it's a bakery, so we're talking about just that, sorry, we're talking about ethanol emissions, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, what kind of concentrations were seen during the December 15th inspection?
I do not have those specific readings.
Bummer. Okay. Maybe I should ask the, Bimbo whether there's been any, I mean, you've done your own monitoring of the leaks since you acquired a PID. So what kind of concentrations did you see during your monitoring efforts?
Yeah, so we did do some, so the thing about concentration in PID, is it doesn't measure flow, right? So we just, so we did take some readings, yesterday, for some of these repairs. We just, so I do have those.
Yeah.
Do you want to see, or I just don't know?
Well, so, okay, I really don't want to share the data yet, because one of the reasons on the data, we're not sharing it yet, but we can give you a broad overview of it, is because it hasn't been calibrated from hexane to being VOCs. And so, we want to make sure that we're giving you a concentration that's a meaningful concentration.
Okay.
But what we did see from a, sort of a, you can see where the repairs are done. The measurements show very small quantities near ambient levels.
Okay.
And where the repairs are not done, you see bigger concentrations, if that's easier,
Can you at least give an order of magnitude, how many parts per million,
like,
either as hexane, whatever you got, like,
So,
send me the
like
units you got.
Like we got down to the lowest.
For prior to the repairs.
Oh, those I don't have.
so prior to the repairs,
Because we didn't have the PID.
we didn't get any of the data from the district, what they
So
measured.
you monitored only after repairs were done?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, that's okay.
Yeah, and we're seeing in the order of like 3 to 5 ppm or 1 to 5, and then that's, what we were measuring is ambient.
Okay. And honestly, I'm probably getting into the weeds a little bit too much. The compliance issue at hand is whether there's a leak or not, whether there's an opening or not, rather than the concentration. I've got a bit of a refinery background, so I'm just trying to get an understanding of whether it's, 50,000 ppm, 100,000 ppm, or whether these leaks that were detected by the district were on the order of like 500 parts per million.
I can just give you some context, at least, if you like that. Typical ethanol concentrations in the inlet, undiluted, are in the 2,000 to 3,000 ppm ballpark.
Okay.
Right, so once you detect a leak, it's going to obviously dilute from there, so we're definitely sub 10,000 ppm, not significant.
Relatively low.
Yes, for context.
But I guess of course, the point you brought up is that these lines are under pressure, and so we don't know how much of that was blowing out. But we're not talking about, the amount of emissions that are going to the atmosphere are not such that we're talking about tons per year levels.
I would not think so.
From what I'm hearing. Okay.
Right, and I think maybe to put in perspective that the facility's total VOC emissions, I mean, I know this is after the oxidation catalyst, is only on the order of 2 tons a year.
Right,
So it's pretty small.
Right, although you're controlling to greater than 90%.
90%
control
is what they
efficiency,
consider,
and then
yeah.
what we're talking about being emitted here are the uncontrolled emissions.
Sure,
Those are-
so the max you could I mean, if everything in a whole year came out the whole, you'd be 10 times that.
Right.
But, I mean, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then tell me more about the quarterly inspections that are done.
Quarterly inspections,
And I'm specifically wondering like, what's the role of the person that does the inspections? What type of
yeah,
measurements or visual observations are they doing and how are they documented?
okay, so yeah, let me see if I can bring it up. I mean, had attached them to the. Oh, yeah, here we are. So, these are assigned by our maintenance, staff on site. And, we included it in our first, so maybe that's why it's not on there, but, there's like an inspection here, where they're just, for example, they clean and replace combustion blower, inlet filter. They do like this whole check of the oxidizer, the catalytic oxidizer, and then, it's like visual. I see here exhaust ducting, visual inspection only. So we do those on a quarterly basis. And then we also do, I know it wasn't up there, but, we have, the manufacturer come out and do an annual inspection of that, oxidizer. But as far as the ducting visual inspection, that's done quarterly.
And that's what I'm getting at, actually. I'm just looking at your checklist, but maybe we can get to that, but ducting visual inspection, are they like physically walking the line and looking at every, like those spots where the district held up a PID, is someone putting eyes on those every quarter?
I'm not sure. It just says here bread oven stack checked there, so they check every stack, for each of the oven and the oxidizer. The way they go about doing their visuals, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. I mean, I haven't looked at this in great detail. I did just scan them right now again. I mean, the inspection sheets that I see are called thermal oxidizer weekly inspection. And they seem to be focused on the unit itself and the outlet and not the collection lines. Do you see something different in your inspection sheets where there's inspection of the ductwork? Well, it says exhaust ducting, I see it here, visual inspection quarterly.
That one. Sorry, was it in the first, the very first presentation we sent? Oh, okay.
I've got it on page 138 of the packet. But I mean, the listing here shows that they're looking at the stack. I don't see any indication in the inspection list that they're looking at the ducting itself. This is a pretty important distinction because what we're talking about is whether this was beyond your reasonable control. And if someone were visually inspecting it quarterly, and you know, some of those things that I saw, it's like, that doesn't look quite right? It's starting to degrade and perhaps warrants further investigation.
Yeah. Yeah, just based on, I mean, this is all I have from, our site staff.
Okay. So you don't have anybody here today that was
From
at
the,
the
no, I
facility?
do not, yeah. But, yeah, so they do these inspections. We do have, I believe an alarm on our actual, oxidizer. But I don't know that for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, and can you mentioned this in your presentation, but it sounds like you're expecting to have all the leaks repaired by March 1st at the latest.
Yes.
What's the current estimate, assuming that things go as scheduled? It would be when everything's, because by March first, that's a couple months away, right?
Mhm.
And it sounded like you've got people coming out a lot sooner than that. Are they expected to fix all the leaks soon, or are there still parts that are pending? Like how,
So,
give me a little more
we for
detail.
sure at least, fixed half of the repairs.
Mhm.
So we have, scheduled, for this weekend, to come out and do, some of the repairs. It didn't sound like they had that part ready for, that they were going to replace,
Mhm.
for one of the leaks. So that one is for the following, I believe, the following weekend.
Okay.
So, and this is all, you know, based on what the vendor is sharing with us. And, I mean, you'll see, you saw in the invoices, they had the first day and, you know, tentatively, if there's no issues, rain or, that's the plan there. But, we're definitely making some moves there with doing at least 50% of them. So we're doing our best there. And given the holiday too, I think we had some.
Yeah, but now you're saying mid-January, yet you said that we're pretty much there right now since it's the 11th. And we still needing to confirm some things. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that if we grant this as you requested until March 1st, and you can't get things done by March 1st, you know, we're gonna be back here doing this all over again in 2 months. So I want to get a sense of confidence, what kind of reassurances you've been given or can give us that, you know, this is the appropriate measure, this would be appropriate measure to take should we find it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, so since we first, since we got the NOV, and they were completed, that was, since they did the first repairs on the 24th. And, we did the test yesterday and we showed that more than half of them should be good. That we are, positive that, March 1st is more than enough for us to complete our repairs. And,
I mean, maybe I'll jump in here. So January 14th, which is, I think that's Sunday, right? Where they've got repairs, so it's a scheduled repair time. The anticipation is that the remaining leaks should be fixed, and then the one part that's needed is still pending. After that, so that maybe one more week after that, and then a return to ensure that all the repairs are working the way they're supposed to be working.
So it sounds like if everything goes as scheduled before the end of January, the
Yeah.
repair should be complete.
Right, and if not, probably mid-February, which again would get you in before the March 1st deadline. So, I mean, at least the scheduled technicians are coming out, you know, approximately once a week or once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Be able to get the repairs done.
Go ahead.
Sorry, and then is your operation 24/7 or you guys?
24/7, 24, there is a down day or two to do, cleaning.
So you have a window for shutdown at some point?
There is, yeah, it's based on, seasonality, demand, but we definitely do have some of those.
That was like.
Okay, well, my next question goes more toward IND and in terms of curtailing operations and negative consequences should this request not be granted. I guess this could be a question for both, you know, since it doesn't sound like the district is asking for anybody to be forced to shut down completely or anything like that, what would be the negative consequence should we not grant this? And I guess I will ask that to both the district and to you.
Or is the question, what would the negative
Yeah,
consequence if
negative,
they had to completely shut down?
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like anybody's asking to completely shut down, so I'm
Okay, so then
I'm trying to
maybe there's some
understand,
nuance.
I'm trying to understand what the impact would be to your business should we say, should this not be granted?
Okay, yeah, so, I think I gave a 30-day revenue and employees that are employed. And it's also kind of what, Julie mentioned here, it's also, you know, the NOV, we were just, depending on how many days we would have the, shutdown,
But I guess, are we talking about a fine? Are we talking about some other
Yeah,
action?
maybe
Right,
the
yeah.
question for the district
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
You're,
that's
you're,
nice for both.
what we're hearing from the district is, we're not asking you to shut down, we've issued you an NOV. And you're gonna have to pay a fine probably as a result of that. If the variance were denied, what's the district's position in terms of, like, what's the difference?
As you've seen with other facilities in the past, and this question has come up in the past with other facilities as well. So I'll give you the general facility answer first, and that is that when we issue the notices of violations, it is on the facility to comply and to fix it as soon as possible. And each of those notices of violation does have a penalty associated with it, because that is happened in the past. And in this case, again, it would have an associated penalty with the notice of violation. Going forward, our inspections are not scheduled. They are, well, our stack tests, our inspections are not scheduled. It is at the discretion of the district to send out inspectors or not at whichever times they are. It's also based on complaints. Obviously, we do send out inspectors when we do get complaints. Should our inspector go out again, find more violations, and there be another notice of violation set out, then that would be likewise assessed to a penalty. For other facilities, to shut down a facility is not what we're asking for here. And there's an order, there's discretion in the levels of impact and the severity of the situation that our compliance has taken into account. If it was or is a more severe impact, then obviously we could move on to other avenues, such as asking you for abatement orders for more severe cases. I hope that is.
It sounds like you don't think a stipulated abatement order is appropriate in this case.
I have not had discussions with my management about that. No, I have not.
But based on what I'm hearing from you, that this is not a case where that would be a typical route that would be needed.
I have not been familiar too many with stipulated abatement orders. I've not heard that from management on this particular one. And you've heard the timeline, hopefully that I have.
Right. Okay.
I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, I didn't have any other questions either.
I don't have any other questions either.
All right, so in the interim, have we heard any requests from members of the public to speak on this matter, Madam Clerk?
Dr. Spencer, we have no members of the public requesting to provide public comment on the petition 4539.
All right, so then the public comment period for petition 4539 is closed and the board will proceed with discussion on this item. I guess we'll go ahead and open it up in terms of when making findings in order to grant a variance, we have to make the 6 findings. And on item A, it sounds like everybody is in agreement of which rule would be in violation or is in violation. On finding B, is this in the reasonable control or was this beyond the reasonable control of the petitioner? And I think that's going to be our biggest point of discussion.
Usually is.
So
may as well hit the hardest one
yes,
first. Right?
that's right. What did the petitioner know and when did they know it?
Right, right. Yeah, there are plenty of like discolored spots, if you want to call them that. There's areas where it looks like the insulation has degraded to a point where, it doesn't look so great. And it sounds to me like they're doing some type of visual inspection. It's not clear to me that they're actually walking the ducts and seeing, like, I don't know if they saw those spots or not. We don't have anybody here that could speak to that. And that's the biggest concern I've got is, we've got inspection of there's an item that talks about inspecting the ducts, but then when you look at the inspection sheet, it talks about inspecting the stacks.
Yeah.
Which is a part of the duct, but it's not the entire line.
Sure.
Um,
And I guess, is it a reasonable expectation for if you've told that you've been told that there's an inlet flow leak in September? Is it a reasonable expectation to have done a walk of the duct or had some additional evaluation done? Because if you get a notice of something and then you do a thorough inspection that doesn't find anything, then when something else comes up in December, then it would be reasonable to assume that they didn't know about it at the time.
Yeah, and then I guess the other question, because what we're talking about is, he was talking about a damper. So that's it's a known opening.
Yeah.
And they fixed that. So that doesn't really relate to having leaks.
On December 24th, though. That damper,
well,
at least according to their slides, they got it fixed on the 24th of December.
okay. But that doesn't, the existence of an open damper doesn't really, to me, convert into somebody walking a line and looking for cracks and openings and that sort of thing. It's kind of it's almost like a separate issue.
Okay, and that's helpful.
So, if this were a refinery, it would be, to me, very clear that this is not beyond the reasonable control. They're supposed to be inspecting these things and walking a line. We're talking about a bakery here that has low concentrations of VOCs. There's nothing in the permit that says you must measure at all these points. So we're relying on them looking at the ductwork and deciding whether or not it's sufficiently sealed. And, the fact that this is an insulated line, if you've got degradation in the insulation, that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the pipe itself. If you heard hissing and didn't do anything about it, that would be another matter. So, I think when we talk about it being beyond their reasonable control and looking at the inspections, I would certainly want to urge them to more thoroughly document visual inspections of their ductwork. But I don't know that that's I don't know that the lack of that documentation implies that they didn't do what they were supposed to do, or what would they reasonably be expected to do for proactive preventive maintenance and inspection. So I'm actually inclined to say that this was beyond their reasonable control. On the basis that there isn't enough indication that they should have detected a leak, in my view. If they were required to monitor for VOCs, these leaks don't just pop up. But if they're just looking at some damaged insulation, it to me doesn't mean that they know that there's a leak or should have known that there was a leak.
That's good information. Everyone's has any thoughts on item B? Or item B?
Yeah, I kind of go along with the engineer, although, it could be defective material or it could just be regular wear and tear. And like you said, you're not required to be, detecting them, so I would go along with the engineer with the, point B, basically.
Yeah, I think that perspective is very helpful. So thank you. So I think in this circumstance, I would agree that, finding B could be made that this was not in their reasonable control. And so moving on to finding C, in terms of correspond, such closing or taking a leave without corresponding benefit, reducing air contaminants. I think that we all agree that we can make that one. So unless anybody has any objection to that.
Agreed.
Okay, then finding D, that the applicant has been given consideration for curtailing operations and source containing variance. I think they considered it. I think we asked about it. Any other thoughts?
No, I mean, this, looks like this ductwork is all interconnected. And, we didn't ask. And maybe we should have, I don't know if we can, at this point, if we can reopen to ask this question, is whether the remaining leak. It sounds like they're down to, there's this one part that's missing in one leak. Whether that duct could be isolated and what impact that would have.
Well, do we want to go ahead and open it back up and?
Is that
ask
permissible?
Directly?
Okay.
I think we can vote on that. Yeah,
Did you hear the question? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So that part was for, I believe it's for so they actually repaired it. It's the damper purge.
Okay,
And, but the bakery's not happy for how it is.
so it's a temporary fix.
Yeah,
We don't know how effective it is.
so it's, yeah.
Okay. Is that a line that I don't know that this really affects our deliberations at all, but I'm curious, is that a line that can be isolated? Like, what would happen if you needed to isolate that? Would you have to shut down the whole place? Or could you stop making bread in this one area and have the rest of the facility continue to?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The inlet damper purge, that might be actually the open and
Sounds like it's a
close,
pretty
yeah.
critical part to the whole operation
Yeah.
there. Like, it's a bit, especially if it's a safety feature.
Oh, yeah, that's
Isn't that
the-
the inlet damper purge on the thermal oxidizer?
Yeah,
And
that-
which again is
Okay,
then is completely critical, so you
Okay.
can't,
You wouldn't be able to isolate
you
that.
can't, yeah, you either have control on or no control on.
Right,
So you
Right.
got, yeah.
okay, all right.
The district has a comment?
I was just gonna say, you got there, we are very familiar with the system as well. Yeah, it's right near the oxidizer. You could not operate the oxidizer with that isolated.
Okay, and that's the part that needs to be replaced.
Well, so it was repaired, I think it was repair number one on the exhibit that we provided on the presentation. It just, the bakery wasn't happy with how it just,
Okay.
turned out.
Got it.
But they did do the repair as we showed,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, so a new component that the vendor is manufacturing to replace.
Right, so in good faith, they've done a temporary repair, but need to do better repair to
gotcha,
properly fix it.
okay. All right, we can close.
Okay, question.
Beginning, yes.
All right, sounds good. So then moving on to finding, to finding.
Before we move on, can I clarify the board finding for C?
Proceed that closing, such closing too would be without corresponding benefit and reducing of contaminants, and yes, we find that closing or taking would be without corresponding benefit.
Do you need like detail as to why? That's what you're looking for? Okay,
Because the emissions are not controlled and are diffusion and are unable to make an exact estimate. Item E, during the period that the variance is in effect, the applicant will reduce excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible. The temporary repairs have already been done, and they've been quite, the list of repairs that are currently in place and scheduled, we find that it meets that condition for item E, unless anybody has an additional thought or objection.
no, I mean, I think that's exactly right, is that they're sort of already doing that. But, it sounds like there have been some temporary repairs placed on things that until more permanent repairs can be made.
All right, and so for item F, during the period the variance is in effect, that the applicant will monitor or otherwise quantify emission levels from the source requested to do so by the district and report these emission levels to the district pursuant to a schedule established. There's been no issues with the record keeping here. So.
Well, I guess it's not our place to ask for monitoring, is that right? It seems reasonable that the applicant should be monitoring the leaks with the PID, since they've rented one, they're doing the monitoring, they need to disclose, they should be disclosing that. And it sounds like the inspections are done on a weekly basis.
I guess that's it.
So I think that should be one of the conditions that we place in there, is that they monitor and disclose
And
those
report we-
readings.
Monitor weekly, report weekly, or monitor daily and report weekly. What kind of, so if we're gonna talk about a schedule, then we need to.
Did we hear how often they're monitoring? I don't know that we did. I think weekly is fine. I don't think on a day-to-day basis, they don't change that much, but it needs to be during operation. And they need to give weekly numbers until the repairs are concluded.
Okay, and then reported within 24 hours. In terms of the timeline.
Is there, I'm not sure what the norm is there in terms of how the information gets transmitted to the district and the normal frequency. I think it's reasonable to give them enough time to have, like, they're doing the monitoring. It sounds like there's some conversion, but that should be pretty straightforward to do once, you know, we're giving them notice that they need to be able to make those conversions.
Yeah, it should be,
Simple math.
it should be done promptly. The question, what is a reasonable amount of time to give them to do that?
That would be up to the discretion of the board, and there has been, in prior cases of previous variances that, the board has established a day of the week where reports can be submitted.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's so critical that we need to say you have to report within 24 hours either. We're not talking about large emissions here or nuisance issues. We're talking about sort of a longer term, like we'd like to see progress, and we need to make sure that you're documenting what the emissions are. So
Yeah,
it seems reasonable to give them a week from the time that it's monitored to the time that it's disclosed. I wouldn't want it to be any longer than that, but I'm open to suggestion as well.
All right, so let me ask you, on behalf of the Bakeries, how long do you think it would take to get that information and sent over to the district?
So I think your discussion where you said monitoring it weekly and
We were,
giving a 1 week till we give you the data is completely reasonable.
okay,
And then, you know, there's a question of how, like, what points are being monitored. At a minimum, it should be all of the points that were identified by the district in their notice of violation.
I would agree with that.
I would hope they do a little bit more than that, but I don't know that we need to require that here,
I agree.
because we're talking about relief from those specific points mainly.
Can I ask for a quick clarification on the monitoring, because the monitoring only started yesterday. So,
We were talking about going forward.
okay, only forward, thank you.
I would also like clarification so that we can include that, in the draft, minutes. As per, just regarding the date or the due date of when the reporting of the report should be submitted to the district staff.
Yeah,
Would you like?
I don't know how
like every
prescriptive we need to be.
Thursday, every
I would
other
say that
Thursday?
the monitoring should be,
I would
at
say,
least once every 7 days and reported within 7 days to the district.
you know, since we need to pick something, I would say it should be done every Wednesday and report.
Well, I don't know that we need to be that prescriptive though, to tell them which day of the week they need to monitor, because we don't know what their maintenance schedule is and what.
My concern is just the submission date of the reporting.
7 calendar days after monitoring is done, and monitoring must be done every 7 calendar days.
Sounds
Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm trying to give the facility as much flexibility as possible, but make sure that we're getting the data in a timely manner.
Okay, that works for me then.
We allow questions, but at this point, it's sort of back and forth. But
Yeah, it is a little
reasonable.
back and forth, but we did ask the petitioner
Yeah.
questions, but somebody tried to let the district say something.
I have a clarification question on the condition. And, that's just because I've heard a little bit of, potential confusion. And that is, are you requesting the 10 leak locations be monitored? Or
Yes.
are you requesting as, since you are giving a variance to permit condition number 8, which is that there be no leakage along the, piping leading to the catalytic oxidizer, that you're requesting that they, monitor the entire area where there may be fugitive emissions if condition number 8 is not in place, because that's what you're giving the variance for.
Understood. Yeah, that's a good clarification. When you're doing fugitive monitoring, you have to specify what points you're monitoring at. I'm not expecting them to do a full-blown refinery style, every joint, every coupling. I would expect that they're doing monitoring of the points where leaks were detected. And perhaps we should add this in, actually, that during the monitoring, that some kind of visual inspection is done, and if additional suspicious points are identified, that those points should be monitored as well.
Now, are we going to ask them only to do it at the points where the leaks were noted, or are we gonna ask them to walk the entire length? If we're gonna add that.
It's a good question. I mean, we're probably. You know what, the district identified these points. They're getting relief from, enforcement on any fugitive leaks at this point, essentially, along the whole line for the duration of the variance.
But we still want what's there reported.
We wanna know where the leaks are, what leaks are still there. I think I don't think we need to create additional monitoring requirements that don't exist on the facility already. The district will probably I would expect the district will probably go out and do an inspection after everything's done. And, if there are additional leaks found at that point, then, we've got a different issue, because that'll be after the variance is concluded.
Yeah, and this is a very short variance.
Exactly,
Less than 2 months.
exactly. So, yeah, I think it's reasonable for the purposes of what we're trying to do here, that they monitor at those points only. I would certainly urge the applicant to be doing inspections, proactively finding any other leaks, because they know that it's in their best interest. Because they're not gonna be able to come in 2 months and say it's beyond our reasonable control. We didn't have any idea that there were any leaks on the line.
Yeah.
But I think for the purposes of the variance condition, we can be very prescriptive and say that they're monitoring only at the points where leaks were detected by the district.
If I may, counsel for the hearing board and the health does have,
Oh, please.
Oh, yes. Please.
Oh, yes, hello. I'm not sure if this is entirely relevant to the discussion right now, but I just wanted to be sure, did we address the Title V issue? Whether this was or was not a Title V source?
It was addressed in testimony. This is a source that is limited to 50 tons per year to keep them under the Title V threshold. Their actual emissions I believe, were reported to be approximately 2 tons per year. Am I right about that?
Correct,
Yeah.
and just maybe adding that the Title V thresholds dropped down to 25 tons now.
Okay.
But even if every bit of emission leaked out, you'd be only at 20 tons, which is still
Right.
below the 25 tons. So, which is not what's happening.
So essentially, Emily, the answer is that they're well under the Title V thresholds as given in testimony.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're not giving any relief from Title V requirements. Thank you for.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so delete.
So we got, I think we've got, did we get the wording of the monitoring sufficiently detailed?
I believe so, just. Moving around. Again, okay, I believe so, we would still need to have, the specification for the condition and the district rules, the beginning and the expiration of the variance. And, if there are any additional conditions that the hearing board would like to include.
I mean, we're going through it.
Yeah,
So, I mean, district rule 21. And the condition number is condition number 8. As it applies to the permit listed in APCD 2006 PTO 951149. And the variance will begin today and expire on March 1st, 2024.
Did you get rule
So
67.24 as well?
Oh, yeah.
67.24 D2 III.
Thank you. District rule in addition to 21, rule 67, as he said, 242
And for clarification, for item F, I do have, the conditions as petitioner will monitor with PID on a weekly basis during operation. And then the inspections will be done on a weekly basis and reporting within 7 days.
Yes.
Yes.
To a McGee Hill.
Yep.
At the district offices, and all the information will be included on the draft minutes, how you can submit them. And the monitoring would include, and the points that have been identified, the 10 points that were identified by the district originally. And any additional visual findings they might have during visual observation. Right?
Any other suspicious points identified during visual observations?
At the inspected sites. Was that your question?
For the record, would you like me to include my email address? I can say it out loud for
Yes,
the record
please.
right now.
Thank you.
Yes, it is Day McGee Hill, and my email address is TEH.MAGEHILL@SDAPCD.org.
Thank you.
And I didn't hear it, but I shouldn't assume anything. Make sure that in the monitoring condition, if they're monitoring every 7 calendar days.
Yes, yes, monitoring every 7 calendar days, and the reporting would be submitted within
7 calendar days of monitoring, right?
The petitioner has a question.
Yeah, just on the 7 days, so when we do have a down day, production is off for the day. So for that day, we just say production off, or we still have them still go out there and.
You're only required to monitor once a week
Okay.
during normal
Gotcha.
operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
during operation.
I mean, you may want to monitor more than that, that's up to you, but the
Okay.
variance is gonna require once a week
Okay.
during operation, yeah.
And, can I ask, who will make that motion?
I was gonna say, do we have a motion? I was gonna ask, if we need more clarification, I was gonna ask for the motion. Okay, do we have a
So-
motion to?
Yeah, I'll move that we grant the variance, with the findings as we discussed.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, doctors, Spencer. Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
member Engelmann,
Aye.
Dr. Spencer.
Aye.
That motion passes with all members present voting aye, with the exception of Vice Chair Schlick and Chair Rodriguez, who are not present for today's meeting.
Great, well, thank you, everyone. That concludes the hearing board business for the meeting of January 11, 2024. The next regular meeting of the APCD hearing board will take place on January 25, 2024 at 9 a.m. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.